Welcome everyone to our first MedTech Market Access and HEOR workshop. I'm happy from wherever you are joining today in the world. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Deepak. I'm a partner at Alira Health, and it's my honor and privilege to invite the entire committee member and the participants today to be a part of this workshop where the health economics and outcome research and its relationship with the medical devices market access will be discussed. My sincere thanks to ISPOR, MassMEDIC, and Alira Health for putting this event together. This event is focused on bringing the major challenges that a medical device or a digital health company faces in accessing the US market, and how health economic and outcome research can help them address some of those challenges. We have got a great panel of experts today to guide you through different topics from one corner of understanding HEOR to another corner in application to your technology. Before we move in, I want to give a shout out to our keynote speakers and help them explain how we came across and how different our organizations are. Gab, uh, Gabriele Brambilla is the Chief Executive Officer at Alira Health. We have Richard Wilkie, Chief Scientific Officer at ISPOR, and we have Brian Johnson, President of MassMEDIC. Will be opening us and giving their insight into this workshop. I will give a first chance to Gabriele.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are connected. It's a pleasure to be here. Finally, this is happening. I'll take just 5 minutes of your time to tell a little bit of the history, why we arrive at this particular event and the different steps, and maybe launch a couple of 2 or 3 provocative questions for you to keep in mind during this particular session. So the idea of creating a more dedicated initiative or think tank around the importance of HEOR and market access in medtech happened. I started about a year ago, and I was sitting in the office of ISPOR together with one of the Amy, one of the employees of ISPOR now. She's not there anymore, and other chiefs of the organization. And the major need was how can we help MedTech to better understand the importance of HEOR in helping them accelerating the launch of their products and the access to patients and convincing payors to actually pay for these products and provide these products to the different patients and providers. So we started this adventure, and the first idea was who we should involve from an industry perspective. As you know, ISPOR will tell you more. Richard is a professional association, but represented by a lot of industries and stakeholders. But we wanted to have a very strong industry presence, and that's when I reached out to Brian. I'm on the board of MassMEDIC, and I said, Brian, would you like to be involved in this? And Brian gave me the chance to present it to the board of MassMEDIC, and I have seen only a few times so much excitement around an initiative, and so I'm really happy that Brian said let's do it, and the board members said let's do it, and a big applause to MassMEDIC and ISPOR that decided to move forward with this. Now, the first comment is this is just the beginning. Okay, this is the one event to launch and kick off this initiative, but I hope this first event will be just one step, one first milestone toward the establishment of a really leading and influential committee and think tank in HEOR and market access dedicated to the medtech world. So from my perspective, again, this is just the first get together. The committee that had developed the event has been talking for the last 3-4 months and developing a good chemistry to make it happen. But I hope this is not just the goal. The goal is really to create awareness of the importance of HEOR. And I will actually try to give you 3 goals that I would like you to focus on if you like the idea in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years while you develop this particular committee, initiative, think tank, you can call it in many ways. And I think you have all the great ingredients to make it happen, because with ISPOR, which is the biggest association in the world for HEOR, MassMEDIC, and hopefully maybe Medtech Europe, I'm just launching the Assist here, or another organization that representing the industry will be involved in the future. So the first thing that I would like you to think about while you do your program, and I think that the program is also addressing this particular need and topic, is let's try and let's think MedTech. HEOR and market access have been thinking pharma for many, many years, right? And the MedTech world has always seen the pricing component, reimbursement component, but not really the HEOR component of market access per se in their way of operating. So I think MedTech needs a specific focus by the HEOR, a specific think tank, as you're developing here, dedicated to them to develop HEOR methodologies, tools, best practices for MedTech, not just inheriting what pharma is doing. The two worlds are very different. They are converging in some certain areas like IVD, precision medicine, but they have very different needs. And I'm managing a company that has both the pharma team and the MedTech team providing services in market access. I gotta tell you, I personally think MedTech is a lot more complicated than pharma. There's a lot more nuances. There's a lot more, it's a lot less straightforward. So it needs MedTech needs a lot more help. So I hope that you're going to be able to provide the leading inspiration and understanding of how HEOR works and how it can be helpful for different MedTech companies. So let's think MedTech. That's the first one. The second one, according that is important, is help yourself in creating awareness of the importance of HEOR and market access, not just to the external stakeholders, because, hey guys, payers, they know the importance of HEOR. They're pushing you towards using more HEOR. Investors, they know the importance of health economics. They're asking a startup company every time, what is your health economics value, right? What is your pitch from a health economics perspective? Providers, they do the same. The value assessment committee is going to focus a lot on health economics. So I think that the most difficult battle would be, how can I get more focused attention, and how can I go up in the ranking of the functions within my own company? How can be HEOR taken in consideration not as an afterthought, not as something that, oh, I did my regulatory, I did my clinical, now, oh, I got to think about health economics, how am I going to do this? And that's already too late. So how can you convince your R&D team that you need an HEOR approach to develop the right product? How can you develop a relationship with regulatory and say, hey guys, when we do a clinical trial, let's think about the regulatory endpoints, but also maybe secondary endpoints for health economics, and let's do it together. How can you help your sales and marketing team understanding that the product is not sold only directly to the doctor or the nurse? Products more and more are sold in the C-suites of the IDNs and the ACOs. And when you talk to the C-suites of the IDNs and the ACOs, you gotta talk health economics. So that's why you become important. How can you help sales guys and marketing guys to understand that? So that's what I would like you to try to think of if you think that's an issue. But I see it every day. People that are running HEOR and market access are fighting internally, and they always come too late, or they're not taken in consideration correctly in many decisions in different functions of your company. The third one, and then I'll stop, is let's help MedTech think HEOR and market access globally. Pharma does that well. It's very cumbersome if you every time you think HEOR only for a specific countries without having a global strategy. Pharma, and this is teaching us, and I hope we're going to learn from it, they have what is called a global value dossier, a global approach. And why you need that? Obviously, execution is local in market access. I agree with you. But when you have to think about where to invest resources on a clinical trial, on finding, on proving certain outcomes, I think you have to start globally. And that's where HEOR is important. That's why I'm saying I hope this initiative will not just stop to the US. We'll get the interest from Medtech Europe, from other associations worldwide, because HEOR has to be thought first globally and then executed locally. That's an important step, especially to rationalize better the resources you have to invest in HEOR and in the generation of that particular evidences. Last thing about it is that that's part of my belief. I think that the most important changes in the future in medtech is going to be creating a faster access of products to patients and to providers. And HEOR is a key part of it. And I think I would like you to think also, how can HEOR be connected to somehow not only payers, providers, but patient engagement. I think the future will be in providing effectiveness also through the involvement of patients and not just providers. Obviously depends on your product, right? If you're thinking about elective procedure or a particular surgical products, the doctors will be the key. But if you think about chronic and many other areas, digital, the patients are in the middle. So how can we extend the use of real-world evidence, real-world data, patient-centric approach also in your HEOR? And how can we do that for devices, where tons of information, tons of data are created? Devices, most of them are becoming smart. So those are my key points, and I hope, guys, again, this is going to be just the first step. I'm very proud of what you've built. I was not involved in the committee. I just started the idea a year ago, and just seeing you here with such a good attendance and all the speakers, it's just it makes me very happy. So I'll give back the floor to Deepak. Thank you, Deepak, for letting me be here and giving this short speech.
Thank you, Gabriele, for your insights about how MedTech need to think about HEOR. I'd like to give an opportunity to Richard Wilke, and Richard Wilke is the Chief Scientific Officer at ISPOR. He has been providing also a great guidance in putting the committee and the event together. To hear a bit about him, about his ideas around MedTech, HEOR, and overall initiative.
Thank you, Deepak, and thank you, Gabrielle. It was a pleasure to meet you in person about a year ago, and maybe again sometime soon, I hope. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are seeing your screen.
Okay, good. I'm going to give you just a quick introduction to ISPOR, very quick, and then talk a little bit about some of the MedTech considerations. Some of these will be relevant to the ingredients that Gabrielle just talked about. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ISPOR, but we are a global organization of about 20,000 members. Our mission is to promote health economics and outcomes research to improve decision-making for health globally. We have a variety of stakeholders. A big one is the researchers and academicians. You can see arrayed around here. There are a lot of people that go into a lot of different types of groups and interests that go into this whole picture. So that's been one of our key strengths, is bringing a lot of different people together: the payers, the industry, the researchers, the patients, the providers. In fact, our membership is about, well, you can see down the big blue segment there is 38% pharma, biotech, medical device, with a big slice of the research consulting sector, along with academic students and other people that are important to the whole process and the thought process. This gives you an idea of our different areas of research. So there's a segment up there in the purple, conceptual papers. We do definitely have methodologists. That's one of our strengths, and that's a lot of what we contribute. Economic studies are big. Clinical outcome studies, patient-reported outcomes has really grown over the last 20 years or so. And of course, healthcare use and policy studies. So that's an overview of the kinds of things we try to do, and all of these are relevant to the whole story. An ingredient, some of the ways we get it out, you may be familiar with our leading journal, Value in Health. which has monthly issues, occasional supplements. We have a regional issues version that focuses on different parts of the world other than the Western developed countries. And we have sort of a more we call Value Outcome Spotlight, which is an easy read. It really highlights some of the current things going on. So these are some ways we get the word out and allow our members and our folks to highlight their research. We have a variety of other resources on our website that appeal to different parts of the membership. All, or a very big segment of our past presentations are available in our database, and so on. We are global. One of Gabrielle's points, we have chapters. We have 115 or so chapters around the world, organized into different consortia. These are country level or country region chapters, as well as a number of student chapters. We organize our members into different segments in some ways for their input. We have about a half dozen different councils. One is institutional council, which is the members are organizations. There are different levels of membership, but it's a primary way that the institutions, which is mainly pharma biotech and the service providers, which is about 60% of our overall membership, provide input to the strategy of our organization and talk to the rest of our members. We have about a dozen or so special interest groups, one of which is medical devices and diagnostics. This is an individual membership. Anybody can join. It's been growing a lot under especially Amy's tutelage and management the last couple of years. This is a great venue for people to come and hear what's going on and get involved in specific studies. So ISPOR is very pleased to join MassMEDIC and Alira Health in organizing this. Deepak has been, of course, one of the central people in making it happen, so thanks to you. We can do this because we have a strong commitment to promoting education and growth in medtech. We have our background strong reputation for promoting HEOR excellence. That's our mission. And we've held a ton of different conferences, both regionally and internationally. So we're in a really good position to help in this one, and we're hoping to help with this going forward. So I just like to conclude saying thank you, especially to Amy Pavlock, who's been instrumental in helping get this set up, to Lucinda Orsini, our Associate Chief Science Officer, who's done a lot of work, as well as to Alira and MassMEDIC and for partnering in this. And I look forward to the rest of the day. I hope you learned a lot. Thanks, Deepak.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your words. ISPOR has been a really great contributor to our idea, and with your expertise in health economics and outcome research, we can at least get the global perspective to somewhere into medical devices. Looking forward to the leadership out here. Thank you, Richard. I would like to give opportunity to Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson has been key and instrumental as president of MassMEDIC in putting the work together and putting this team together. Brian, to you.
Thank you, Deepak, and thank you for all your work on this. You really are sort of the backbone of getting this event together. So I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you to Amy Pavlock and the rest of the team at ISPOR and Alira Health. We really could not have done this without you. MassMEDIC is the trade association representing the medtech industry in Massachusetts, and this is an international audience, so perhaps you may not know how robust our ecosystem is for medtech, but we are, I would say, one of the top markets in the world for medtech innovation. When you think about Massachusetts, you must think about innovation and market access, payment landscape. It's all a major headwind on innovation. So we represent the interests of the medtech industry here in Massachusetts. We represent the companies that make medical devices and medical technology, digital health, drug delivery companies, etc. We are so fortunate to represent these incredible firms. But one of the ways that we help them is not just through government affairs and things like that. We want to help our companies innovate and help our industry innovate and find more efficient pathways to market. It's always been the major headwind for our industry, is that we're an engineering-based, innovation-based industry, and yet, I think we're much more versed on the building and the tinkering of technology than we are on the broader landscape of how our technology ends up in the hands of physicians and also in the hands of patients. So when Gab came to me with this idea, I thought it was a fabulous thought, and I thought we needed to get involved and help be a catalyst for bigger ideas. So we're excited to be a part of this. I want to thank my two colleagues for their insightful comments. I'm not going to belabor it with any more, except to say I'm very excited to see what the fruits of all this labor. And Deepak, again, you've been just very instrumental in this. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. It has been always a pleasure to collaborate with MassMEDIC, especially because of the number of innovations that come out of the society that you support. And kudos to the great work that you and your team has done, not only over the past many years, especially also during this challenging times of COVID. So I want to give a shout out to the great work MassMEDIC has done. Now, thank you to all the keynote speakers for being here and sharing their insights and ideas. This today, we are having participants joining from different corners of the world, and I want to recognize them for their time and their interest in this event. This event we will talk about as a life of an innovator, or a life of a journey of an innovator when it comes to market access. We discuss about different aspects. We do not know what a US market holds for me, to what extent my data is being used. And there are a lot of questions and uncertainties that revolve around your daily development of a product or an R&D process. Now, within the 4 hours, we are not able to answer all of them. But what we decided to do today is to pick these 5 topics for you. A topic of the first that will concentrate on how HEOR in the United States is different from Europe. This has been a burning topic. We will look in the session 2, what are the commercial challenges and opportunities medical devices in the US they face. As an overall, you will try to articulate those, and you will feel that you are not alone in that particular shoes, that who have faced that trouble. There are companies who have faced a similar trouble. Then we will jump onto a nice topic, and we always keep on thinking about what a value analysis committee is and what do they do in a hospital system. And we are fortunate today to be joined by 2 people who represent on the other side of the table. So we will have a chance to listen to them, their need of data, and how they look after it. Fourth is, what are the payment situations? Today, we have a lot of buzz about moving towards value-based care, value-based contracts, and how those payment situations have been boosted or hindered by health economic and outcome research data. Last but not the least, many innovations always think about investments, about fundings, and when they go in front of the investors, how can they use the HEOR data? So we will listen from 2 people who work closely in the investment space to a level of what health economics data will be used. So all the sessions are of 40 minutes. I will request the audience to be on mute, listen to the panel discussions. And the last 10 minutes of every panel is a Q&A. I will request all the participants to post their question into the chat, and I will be asking the 3 or 4 questions on your behalf, how much we can accommodate within the 10 minutes. I will also request, while you are asking questions, if you can identify yourself and the organization, that will be good as a best practices to help pose the question to the panelist member. Having said that, I would like to go to the first session and invite Russ Montogomi. If I pronounce your name correctly, Ross, excuse me for that. And Scott Tackett. Ross is the Director of Health Economics and Market Research at AMBU. AMBU has done a tremendous job in bringing the value and communicating through evidence. So he will be sharing those information with us. And Scott has played a critical role in Intuitive in bringing the global market access and the economics value of the robotics system, not only in the US, but also in the Europe. I'm happy to join and invite both of you if you can unmute your mics and give a short introduction about yourself before we go into the 3 questions that is being listed in the slide. Scott?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Deepak. I'm hoping that you can hear me fine.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and good afternoon to some of you that are in the EU. So I'm Scott Tackett. I'm Vice President of Global Access, Value, and Economics at Intuitive. I've been with Intuitive for about 5.5 years now, but been in the medical device, biotech, medtech industry for about 20 years. I'm a practicing healthcare economist, so in both education and in training. Within our global access, value, and economics team at Intuitive, so we have HEOR, we have our health policy, reimbursement payer relations area. We also have another area that's focused on access and value development. And then we have several other critical functions around evidence management. As you can imagine, with robotic technology, we've had more than 24,000 articles written on robotic technology, and obviously there's a great need to not only inventory that evidence, but also see where the gaps are at and to strategize against that. And then the Global Access, Value, and Economics team also exists at the country, region, and corporate level. So it's an integrated team across all of our major focus markets.
Thank you, Scott. Rush?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Russ Montgomery. I'm the Director of Health Economics and Market Access for AMBU. AMBU is a Danish medical device company in the US and have responsibility for the US and Canada for health economics and market access. But you may know AMBU from some of our legacy products like the AMBU bag, resuscitators, other airway types of products. In the past several years, AMBU has moved into endoscopy and is the global leader currently in single-use endoscopy. And so a big focus of my role is demonstrating the value of single-use endoscopy compared to reusable endoscopes. And that involves a range of studies and budget impact analyses, which I'm sure we'll get into in the discussion. My background is as a health services researcher. I've been with AMBU for about a year. Prior to working at AMBU, I was at Discern Health, a consulting firm, for about 4 years, doing market access strategy, value-based care strategy, and health economics. And also, like I mentioned, as a health services researcher, I have that research background from an academic setting as well, and bring that to this role. So looking forward to the discussion this morning.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Scott. As in this session, we will be focusing on defining health economics and putting a background or a definition around that. Scott, my first question for you is, how do you see health economics and outcome research in the context of US healthcare system? What has been your experience in that domain?
Yeah, I think that it's a good question. I think that it's evolved pretty rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years, especially in the med device, med tech space. Many people look at HEOR and they think it as being a very tactical area within the organization. I think it's actually quite the opposite. It's a very strategic area within the organization. And given where we've come from over the last, let's say, 20 years in the US market, if you go back towards 1995 through 2005, that time frame, the market was still evolving around physician preference. So PPIs were quite driven within the discussion around the investment of whether it's med tech or med device, implantables, and so on. And then I think we started to see the emergence of health economics, outcomes research, reimbursement, and so on in this space. And not to take the pharma playbook, but to Gabriella's points early on, is that they are quite different. Med device versus pharma in the HEOR, market access, and so on is quite different in the strategies. And so that evolved, I think, pretty rapidly in the 2005-2015 timeframe, so over that 10-year timeframe. Much of that was because of the emergence of the ACA, obviously Obamacare in the United States, but also we started to move away from this cottageness more to a systemness approach. And that systemness approach really made us look more deeply at what is the impact that med device or med technology is having in the marketplace, and in a meaningful way. So oftentimes we would look at data and evidence around med device, med tech, and it may have not been meaningful to the stakeholders within the marketplace, whether it's a provider, a surgeon, and so on. And so I think that what we've really seen over the last few years is this emergence of HEOR being a more strategic player within that commercial excellence organization as you address the U.S. market. And so the context of it is that as the U.S. market has moved from cottageness to systemness, the emergence of HEOR and the need to embed that in the commercial excellence organization to address the products that are post-market, but also to prepare the market for new technologies, the advancement of new technologies and so on, and to accurately assess them. So I think that a lot of that has played out over the last few years. I think HEOR is here to stay in a big way in med tech and med device. And to some of the keynote speakers' comments, artificial intelligence, machine learning will become a huge component of the delivery of medical services in the future. And obviously, in order to really truly evaluate the impact of those technologies and the integration of those technologies into interventional approaches, surgical approaches, preventative approaches, it really will take a different perspective of being able to look at the impacts that these technologies are having in a real world setting, and then to be able to translate that into meaningful impacts, both clinical, economic, and also humanistic value. So many times you struggle on the strategic value of HEOR, but I think that if I was, and I think Deepak, whenever we spoke earlier this year at a conference, my guidance to other companies in the industry is I would be doubling down on this effort right now, because I think it will truly pay off in the long run.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, I remember when we speak about HEOR not being tactical, but a strategic move by a company. And that's where the context is. And I will come back to you, Scott, later on different aspects of how we think it is evolving. Let me go to Rush. Rush, from your perspective, you have worked on the service line side, looked at different technologies, and you are right now into one of the organizations that is hugely leveraging on the data of HEOR. So what is the context for you from a HEOR perspective in US healthcare system?
Yeah, well, I would second everything that Scott said about the increasing importance of HEOR. I think it's more and more important, and definitely here to stay, and will only become more important moving forward due to the cost constraints in our system and the increasing focus on value. And I think it's increasingly important both in terms of the downstream and upstream, over the entire course of product development and launch and use. So looking upstream, HEOR, I think, should be part of the early planning of a new product. It should be part of understanding, what are the current cost structures for whatever procedures your device is going to be used in. What are the payment rates for those procedures, and how does your product fit into those? Those discussions need to be happening really early on, I think, to help understand the marketplace and to help set a price that's going to be seen as valuable in the marketplace as well. It also helps with things like customer segmentation and targeting where a new product may see the most value in the system. And also, obviously, for launching a new product, it's incredibly important. And I think, from my perspective, it's very important to think about, who is your decision maker. And I think in most cases, we're talking about payers or providers or both, depending on the type of product that you're launching. And so from a payer perspective, they want to see improved outcomes, lower costs, or preferably both. I think the payer angle can be a bit challenging, and I'm sure folks will get into this a bit more over the course of the day, but achieving coverage and reimbursements is a challenge, especially on the private payer side, but also the public payer side in terms of that value, the evidence that's needed, given the patchwork of payers we have in this country. But there are approaches to do that, and payers are going to expect to see high quality evidence. Excel-based models, simple analyses aren't going to cut it. Published studies from reputable researchers, preferably, and high-impact journals, I think, are really the type of evidence that's expected increasingly in this current environment. And then, on the public payer side, there are avenues for gaining reimbursements and showing value through evidence. And through Medicare, through the NTAP, and in the pass-through payment opportunities. I know that's going to be a topic today as well. But on the provider side, it's an issue of how does your product fit within the current cost structure. And so, if a hospital is being paid using a DRG or a similar capped payment, they want to understand what are all of the costs involved with your product. How does it compare to the current standard of care? What is it going to look like in terms of affecting their margin? And so, providers are going to be looking more for those budget impact analyses. Customized analyses increasingly, I think, are something that we're seeing that hospitals are expecting for their value analysis process. You can't just provide hand over a study. It really needs to be something where you've collected some data from that hospital and put it into a model and shown them clearly what they can expect over the long term if they were to start adopting your technology. And so, I guess it all gets back to knowing your decision maker, knowing what their expectations are, and making sure that you're planning early in that product life cycle to start generating evidence. It's a long process to work with outside researchers or even internally to set up a study, find your study partners, produce the data that you need, publish that information, and get it out and start publicizing it. That's a long process, and so early planning is really essential.
That's really great insights, Rosh, especially when you talk about identifying your stakeholders and generating data from them, and thinking about early. That also speaks to Scott's point of being a strategic rather than a tactical part of it. Coming back to you, Scott, the next question in everyone's mind is, we talk about HEOR, and we talked about HEOR in the context and why is US healthcare system is, where does it land? What are those HEOR methods that have helped medical devices in the US in order to give their value proposition to different stakeholders? And if you can help understand the entire crowd or all the participants with an example.
Yeah, sure. And I'm going to kind of build off of Russ's comments too. I think that the U.S. is like any other international market around the world. I've had the pleasure of being able to do business in more than 30 international markets over the last 20 years. And it's no different than any other market, but it does have some unique challenges with it in order to effectively access the market and to drive forward with commercialization. And, so I think one of the things that you have to sit back and look at before you really embark upon an HEOR, let's say, strategic journey, is you have to really understand what are the needs of that particular market. Each and every individual market is quite unique from themselves. And so to Russ's point, you have to understand your stakeholders within that market. What are the stakeholders that and the issues that evolve around the patient, the physician, the provider, the hospital, the payer, and the policymakers, and you have to really understand how you can address those. So in the US market, the value prop, because of those dynamics I talked about before and Russ was starting to hit upon, is that, you know, we have moved from a cottage industry in the US to more of a systemness industry with the emergence of major IDN systems, ACOs. There's been considerable consolidation of the payer market within the United States over the last 15 years. And that has really brought about a unique dynamic where the market has evolved to be more system driven. And with that, the need to really speak more to what your technology can do and the meaningful value that delivers to each of those different stakeholders I just listed, and how deeply that value is delivered. And so the methods really look at, you know, how you enter the market, and is that market really adoptable to the technology yet? So in many other markets around the world, there's HTAs and so on that effectively act as gatekeepers into the marketplace. They evaluate the technology. They then take those evaluations and make recommendations on coverage and reimbursement. We do have some of those in the US, but they're not as powerful in their structure and in their oversight and governance as we see in some of the EU markets, the Asia Pac markets, and so on. And so because of that, the decision is really made more at the local level in the US. And so you have to, number one, evaluate, can I access the marketplace in a meaningful way? And can I get my technology covered and reimbursed by the major payers, whether it's public or private here in the US? And based on that, you have to then overcome those adoption barriers. So those adoption barriers will be there. The US isn't no different than any other market in the world. There are adoption barriers, but the adoption barriers really exist at the more the provider level and at the payer level. In other markets around the world, those adoption barriers might exist and are much more stringent at the HTA level. So how can I actually gain access into the marketplace and drive coverage and reimbursement decisions? So because of that, and I know you guys are going to talk about it later on, and I don't want to steal some of the thunder from the other presenters, is, you know, as you look to your value analysis committees and so on, how do you answer the questions that will come from those value analysis committees? They are going to be acting much more like a HTA organization within that IDN system or within that major ACO. And so the types of activities and methods that you will embark upon within your HEOR strategy are designed to address that more local need for evidence and value to be recognized and realized. To Russ's point, you know, some of the secret sauce now for the US because of this is taking the data from the hospitals themselves or the IDNs and the ACOs and working with the surgeon, the formulary committees, the value analysis committees, and so on, and really understanding what is the impact that your technology will have within the four walls of that organization. And no longer kind of pointing to some RCT that was done around the world, because depending on your technology, it might be hard to translate the value that technology will have within that targeted provider or whatever it might be in the US. And that's a real challenge because you know, if you're going to invest you know, millions of dollars into your program or into a new technology to treat your patient population, you want to make sure that it's going to deliver on the value in the market and that it will truly deliver on the quadruple aim. You know, is it going to improve outcomes? Is it going to be more cost effective? Is it going to actually improve the patient experience and the care team's experience? So until you can prove that with your evidence, then it's going to be very hard to have those discussions. And really, this is about finding the facts and the data and what the data will support and what the data coming out of the hospital on what is the measurable value. To Russ's point, you know, you're going to have to do some sort of cost evaluation, cost effectiveness, but also is understand, you know, how your technology can drive what is meaningful to that organization. And recall because this is made at more of a local level, every organization will have a different perspective on what is value. And so you have to understand that and not go to the table with a discussion on what you think the value is, but go to the table on a discussion on listening to your customer, your provider, your surgeons, your patients, payers, and policymakers, and really understanding where they see and want value to be delivered within their community. And then work with them in tandem and in concert to bring that evidence to bear. I think that what has been in the past, where you go forward with a discussion on what you think the value is, it oftentimes will not land in the right spot. And there will still be a gap and disconnect between what you're trying to translate in the value message that you're trying to get within your customer base and what the evidence will actually support. Based upon that, once you determine all that, then I think you can start to move down the road of what is HEOR and how can I utilize it more strategically to drive that value proposition and discussion and bring the evidence to the table, and also work with the hospitals to look at what the impact of that technology will be within the four walls of their organization. Again, whether it's descriptive analysis or getting more into differentiate cost effectiveness and differentiate outcomes research, it really depends on where you're falling. Also, your competitive landscape too. If you're entering a market where there's many other technologies that are alternative technologies or complementary, then you're going to have a very competitive landscape. You're going to have to do different types of analysis and different types of studies. If you're entering into a disruptive space and your technology is going to be disrupting the marketplace, maybe potentially impacting the patient journey overall, you're going to have to start to tease out the points of inflection within that patient journey that your technology is bringing value and how it's going to deliver that. So that's really, really important that you tease those sorts of things out, because otherwise you could be investing in HEOR types of studies that really won't have a solid impact in the marketplace, and there will still be a gap on what is the value of the technology long term.
That's a great point, Scott. And Rush also brought out this point of timeline, of thinking about things proactively and strategically. And you brought a point out right now, like working locally and understanding local organization or hospital needs when you are placing your product. So one question to you, and then also I'll go back to Rush on that. How would be a timeline look for an innovative company? So do they include this thought process when they are doing a regulatory trial? They have access to the PIs, or they postpone it at some other point of time? So where the timing looks like, because that's a critical part over here when we talk about which kind of methods we need to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking about some of these patient journey analysis and so on, obviously you can work more upstream on doing those sorts of evaluations, on understanding the impact of the technology on the patient journey. But in concert with that, so you can be parallel pathing certain studies to achieve certain endpoints that you need as far as evidence to fill your evidence gaps as you go to the marketplace. The other part of that is that, again, as you're looking at where you're entering and are you entering into a competitive space or not, then that will also drive your decision and your investment in what types of studies to actually go forward with. But no, even with machine learning, artificial intelligence, some of the data mapping technology that exists on the market today that can speed up the cycle by which you evaluate and do your real-world evidence and studies, that does not mean that it's still going to be a snap of a finger and that you'll have evidence in a couple months. It's still going to take 6 to 12 months to perform many of these types of studies and to really wrestle the data down to the ground to come up with some real solid conclusions. And then it's going to take another 6 months to really drive that into a dissemination form, getting it published and so on. So you're looking at an 18-month investment typically. But some of these other types of studies, the patient journey, some of the early descriptive analysis that you will need to do to establish the evidence in the marketplace, that might take you a couple years to perform, because you're going to have to work with the various types of KOLs to really understand how the technology is impacting the journey And then what is the byproduct of that? What is the clinical and economic displacement that will occur within the marketplace? Because they will have very different meaningful endpoints, and you're going to have to wrestle those down to the ground because, again, those are byproducts of the patient journey. Otherwise, all you know is that the technology impacts the patient journey, but you don't know to what extent. And that is a very meaningful thing. And that will take you a couple years to get through that investment.
Thank you, Scott. Before I move on to the last question and move on to Rush, I just want to let the participants know that we are moving into the Q&A for the first session in next 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function and start asking questions. Scott and Rush will be very happy to use that time to answer your particular questions. Rush, moving on to the third one. We understand US and many European healthcare systems are different, but how does that affect our HEOR space? So how HEOR is different? Like, can I use some of the information that comes from Europe? To what extent I can use and to what extent I cannot use? So what are the differences out there?
Yeah, and I think Scott hit on a little bit of this earlier. I think you really need to understand what's happening locally. A study that's done in Europe for European market access purposes is not going to resonate that much, I think, with audiences in the US, whether they're payers or providers. I think, and the types of studies that you tend to see look a little different. So the HTA agencies in Europe and other places around the world are more interested in sort of traditional cost effectiveness, where you are generating an incremental cost effectiveness ratio, or you're generating a cost per quality adjusted life year. They lay out very clearly what types of data and evidence they're expecting to see in the studies that are produced. And so it's a somewhat of a predictable process in some ways, and the types of studies that you see very much line up to what those HTA agencies are expecting. In the US, typically those types of studies aren't going to resonate as much. I think payers will look at cost effectiveness studies, and I think it will have some impact on their decision making. Providers, probably not as much. They want to see more real world studies. They want to see, how does your product actually perform in the marketplace? What are some real costs you can show from its use in the real world in a US setting? And so I think they are expecting to see US studies. I think they're expecting to see studies that are a little bit less academic. A cost effectiveness study can be very academic and can be sort of hard for someone on value analysis committee to really tease out all of the key messages and to understand what it's going to mean for them. Something that is a retrospective study using US data is comparative or single arm, I think is going to be something that resonates with them much more, because they can then take that and then apply it to their own processes more clearly. They can put it into their own cost models that they may be using to assess whether or not a technology is going to be something that they're interested in and something that will be of value to them. A US real world study will allow them to do that much more than a cost effectiveness study, especially if it's from the UK or from another country in Europe or somewhere else in the world. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. I think it's worth investing in studies that are tailored to local markets, to different countries, and with real world evidence being something that payers and providers, I think, put more weight into than maybe they used to. I think you can do those studies, with some speed. It takes a while, to Scott's points, but retrospective can be very powerful if the studies are done the right way and are using strong methods. So I think it is very important to think about different strategies depending on the market.
Thank you, Rush. Scott, how do you see the difference? Rush rightly said, you alluded to those differences earlier when you said that there is some definitive HTA bodies and we do not have it here in the US. But when we talk about HEOR perspective in applying, let's say, cost effectiveness or budget impact, so what are those differences?
Yeah, I think that to Russ's point, the EU market is going to be much more attentive to looking at standardized measurable impacts, such as an ISER and so on, within their evaluations. And in doing so, what that's going to require is that obviously, in order to calculate the ISER, you're going to look at different types of endpoints to drive that ISER evaluation to get the market to invest in the technology. Part of that is you're going to have to invest in clinical outcomes and outcome measurement that drives, whether it's through PROs and so on, that drives the outcome in that quality. The other part of that is you're going to also have to look at your pricing and how that's impacting the market and what the endpoints are economically that will drive to that under that threshold of use. So, you know, the systemness and the parts of it are much more different. The other thing that you're also starting to see now too is the emergence of the MDR across Europe and the surveillance aspect of that and how you're going to use HEOR strategically to answer that MDR and those MDD regulations. So I think that the EU will continue to be something that we will look to in the scientific regimen of the HEOR work to answer the different issues within the marketplace. But to Russ's point, the translation of that into a US market by using ISER evaluations and so on are going to land kind of flat, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to then really understand, again, the value that you need to outline that your technology is having within the four walls of that organization within the US market. And that difference is quite dramatic, actually. The needs, the technology enablements, how you're going to empower your organization to drive through that. And then the educational component of that is quite different. There's not going to be that heavy scientific regimen that you must answer in order to overcome that H2A evaluation in Europe. So because of that, while it's within one domain of HEOR, you kind of got to think about it in two different strategic, meaningful applications. So the markets are changing. The needs and requirements in the EU are deepening, and I think we're right at the cusp of being able to really have a deeper conversation in the US on what is the impact that your technology has at the local level. I think at one time it was very, very hard to get to that. We had to massage it over a period of time to actually have a meaningful discussion. I think now that we understand the needs more greatly in the US, we can have a deeper discussion there because we can, to Russ's point, we can rapidly get through the types of data based on the data asset and the types of technology with data mapping and so on to get to solid evidence very quickly and then model that out with our customers. So I think that that's the major differences. One is much more strategic in the sense I have to address this to open up the markets within the EU and to drive forward with surveillance and MDR regulations. The other one is more, how do I address this to ensure that I can, and that the end users within the hospitals, the surgeons, and the payers, that they understand the value and that they're willing for that technology to now come into that organization and pull it.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rush, for your great insights in this panel. Now, it is open for questions, and while people are typing those questions, let me ask you one last thought. As a part of an innovation, like I'm standing in myself in the shoes of an innovative company who had just developed a product and I'm going to launch into the US market. I have different challenges. I have regulatory challenges in front of me. I have investment challenges, funding challenges in front of me. So how will an HEOR argument will help bind a lot of those challenges together? We talked about it as a strategic part, right? So is there a way that HEOR can help make all those cases come together and help us go through?
Russ, do you want to take it or do you want me to? It's up to you.
You go for it.
Okay. That's a good question, Deepak. I think that The strategic aspect is number one, I would hope that that organization has invested in HEOR earlier than when they're ready to launch. So unfortunately, if you're investing in HEOR, that by that point, you really missed the mark and you're going to struggle. I think you're actually going to struggle for some time. You're going to probably struggle for the first 3 years. So hopefully you've worked more upstream and you've started the HEOR pathway and what that journey is going to look like within, let's say, 3 years before you launch. If you're investing at that 3 to 4 year period before you launch, you should be in a pretty good position to have meaningful evidence at the time that you launch. Remember, you're going to want to understand what is the unmet need in the marketplace, and scientifically from the data, how is your technology going to address that? Guess what? That takes HEOR work. You're also going to want to understand, how does your technology impact the patient journey, clinically, economically, humanistically, and so on. You're going to want to understand that before you even launch, because that again is something that you're going to point to on the effectiveness of the technology to deliver in the marketplace. The other things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to understand, if I do deliver this to the marketplace, what is the budget impact? What's the cost utility and so on that I would see off of this technology? And you're going to want to do that even before you launch. Now, after you launch, you're obviously going to have much more meaningful data to point to as far as post-market data. Yeah. But before you launch it, you need to have some sort of measurable, meaningful endpoint to point to. So again, those things I just talked about, that's not going to happen in 6 months. It's going to take a couple years for that to happen and to occur, but you really need to have that sort of information upon launch. If you're not, unfortunately, you're going to get met with a lot of resistance when you come into the US market. You're going to have a lot of individuals that are naysayers to the technology, or you're going to allow yourself to be extremely, vulnerable is what I would call it, to your competitors. If you're coming into a competitive position in a situation, they're going to start looking at your data on day one. And unless you've answered how you're truly different, guess what? They're going to say you're not different. So that's going to be something that you're going to have to work out as you go to launch. So hopefully, Deepak, that gives you some answer there.
You caught me over there, Scott, about the launch aspect. Now, we should plan before. Thank you. Rush, any final comments before we move on to our next session?
No, I agree with everything that Scott just said. This is essential for product development and product launch. It's not an optional part of the process, and it needs to happen early as part of your upstream planning. And like I mentioned before, it's not just about generating evidence. It's about informing your marketing and sales strategy as well, right? It's about understanding what kind of price is going to fit into the marketplace. It's about understanding the cost challenges that your customers are going to face and how to build a sales argument around it. So it's integrated with all of the other aspects that people typically think about when they think about product launch. It's not something that's siloed off to the left and nice to have. And so I think understanding that and starting early are essential.
Perfect. Scott and Russ, I'm going to take a couple of minutes more because we got in the chat 2 questions for you that arrived a bit late, but people will benefit by asking. We have Chow, who is asking, what do you think about the differences of HEOR for diagnostic, other medical devices, and digital health products among medical devices? Are they different? What are the differences?
Russ, you want to take the lead on this one, and then I'll do cleanup, I guess.
I don't have as much experience with the diagnostic space, so Scott, if you feel like you have, or maybe are more equipped to answer it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I don't think that if you look at the aspect of HEOR and the applications, whether it's diagnostic, med device, med tech, and so on, there's different nuances that you're going to have to pay attention to. The digitalization aspect that is really becoming a huge, not only opportunity and a challenge on how you address that, but also the emergence of it and how it's going to weave its way through the different technology stacks in the marketplace are going to be something that we're going to have to really get ahead of. Case in point, if you look at an HTA organization globally, they are very, very good at evaluating the technology based on how it looks today or in the past. They are not necessarily equipped to evaluate technologies such as the emergence of digitalization on how to evaluate this technology differently now based on artificial intelligence, machine learning, the ecosystem designs that are now coming with these technologies that are coming to the marketplace. So I think there is this emergence of policy formation that will need to occur on this front, and guidance coming from the various HTA members or HTAI and so on how do you actually deliver a more thoughtful, holistic evaluation of diagnostic technologies. You also have the genomic technologies and molecules and so on that are incorporating artificial intelligence, machine learning into the delivery of medicine. So I think that that's going to be an area that we're going to have to really focus in on. And then obviously, in order to have that discussion with an HTA, you're going to have studies that support that, and they've got to be well thought out and well designed to bring meaningful value to that discussion. So I think that's where the industry is going to have to embark upon and really address that problem to solve over the next 10 to 15 years, because we're really at the cusp of a evolution and really a revolution in digitalization in medicine, and I think we're going to have to address that.
Yeah, that's perfectly to the point. From my personal experience with diagnostics and digital health products, the idea of HEOR remains the same. You are trying to understand the patient journey and put the value in front of your purchaser. To earlier point of Russ, it is very critical to understand who are your stakeholders and what value will resonate. And as you rightly mentioned, Russ mentioned it earlier, understanding stakeholders is critical. We have another question, Alessandro, from Alessandro. And Russ, it may be a great segue to you. The question is, do you need to have the final product ready to perform the analysis, or you can start even before the product is optimized? So the question is, do we have to wait for the product to be in the design freeze phase and then go from there? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the type of product that you have and what the competitive landscape looks like. So, one thing that you can do early on is make sure that there is evidence out there about the true costs of the competing products that are out there that you may be competing against. So that's something that has been a big focus of us at Ambu. We're trying to disrupt the endoscopy segment, and we are competing against reusable endoscopes. And the true cost of reusable endoscopy was not something that was really well documented. All of the costs that are incurred by a hospital. And so prior to product launches, we really focus on studying that question. So really publishing data, publishing evidence on the comparison technology that we eventually will be up against. If you are in a situation where you can evaluate the product before you launch, I think that is ideal. Maybe you've gotten clearance and you want to spend a few months doing a controlled market release where you collect some data that you can quickly turn around. I think a lot of times people want to, as soon as you get that clearance to launch and start selling. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Either way, I think making sure you have the systems in place to collect the data that you need, whether it's pre-launch or post-launch. A study that coming out 3 months post-launch is still going to be very, very impactful, right? I mean, you're still trying to gain momentum. You're still trying to tell the value story. So, I wouldn't worry too much about having all of the published data about your own product out there at launch. That can be challenging for a number of reasons. But if you do have opportunities to put out evidence that you will tell the story, do that if you can. And then if you need to wait until clearance happens or approval happens, try to quickly turn around a study on your own product that you can then compare to the evidence that you've already gotten out there.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Scott, for your time today. It has been really, really insightful. I do want to acknowledge that there are a couple of more questions on the chat, but in the interest of the time, I will keep them for the next session. And they are Farah, to your question in the chat, it will resonate more onto our next panel when Aarti and Julia will be discussing about challenges. So I want to thank you both of you, Scott and Russ, for your time and your insights. Great study. You put the platform for our discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Deepak, and great to work with you too, Russ. Really appreciate it.
Same to you, Scott. And yeah, Deepak, thanks for the opportunity. Great to be with you all.
Thank you. Thank you both. So, friends, we are going to move to our next discussion topic. And first, join with me to invite our two great panelists for this discussion. We have Aarti Chandran. She is Vice President and Head of Worldwide Health Economic and Outcome Research at BD. Aarti, good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Aarti. And we have Julia Lankiewicz. She is the Global Head of Clinical Affairs and HEOR at Bosch Health Division. It's a great company to be in from a different consumer perspective, and Julia decided to be part of the panel. Happy to have both of you over here. So what we are going to discuss in this panel is to look at various commercial challenges and opportunities for the medical devices. More often than not, many people feel it difficult to articulate their problems, and they feel that the commercial challenges that we are facing as a medical device, diagnostic, or a digital health, is it something that is unique to us, or it is what everyone out there is also facing, right? So Aarti and Julia agreed to be in the part of this panel and then to discuss in overall what is the significant commercial challenges that medical devices face in the US. The scope of the challenges can be enormous. We all agree that, and it will vary depending on the type of the medical devices, but it will be great to learn from both of your experience, Aarti and Julia. Once again, to all the while you are listening to Aarti and Julia, if you have any questions, type it in the chat. We have last 10 minutes reserved to answer your questions. If we cannot reach to your questions by the end of the session, we will make sure that we reach out to you and have your questions answered during the break time. Aarti, my first question to you. Help me introduce a bit of introduction about yourself will be great for the audience. And from your personal experiences or different indications that you have worked on, what are those challenges you have faced? It can be many. Just pick 3 of them that you want to share with the audience today.
Yeah, let me start by introducing myself. So again, as Deepak mentioned, my name is Aarti Chandran. I lead the Health Economics and Outcomes Research capability for Becton Dickinson, or BD. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, BD is a multinational med tech company. We manufacture medical devices, instrument systems, reagents. We also provide some consulting and analytics services in different markets. The company's an established med tech leader with over 120 years of experiencing servicing customers. But those customers today are healthcare institutions, science and research centers, clinical labs, and patients directly as well. We also have B2B businesses where we support the pharmaceutical industry. And so the portfolio for BD is quite diverse. So we have pharmacy and lab automation, we have surgery, vascular access technologies, home care, including a diabetes management arm. But that diverse portfolio includes capital equipment. It includes disposable or consumable technologies, software, digital. And so, Deepak, your question is really around what spaces have I have I had experience with, and working with a company with such a diverse portfolio allows you to be very agile in practicing the discipline of HEOR, but it also exposes you to a variety of different challenges that pop up across the spectrum, and a spectrum that I'm sure represents many of the portfolios of the individuals on this call. So before I jump into that, I spent half my career in pharma, now half my career in medical device. And so there's a juxtaposition there also that I want to highlight. For me, some of the key challenges, just regardless of a therapeutic area, are really around innovation timelines and the high variability of innovation timelines. Medical devices, medical technologies are developed a lot faster than pharma. And when we think about doing HEOR research to be able to articulate the value of that technology, demonstrate the impact it has on a system, process, outcome, to be able to support its value at launch, it's a lot of work to be done in sometimes a very short period of time. When you think about capital equipment, you probably have the longer development cycle there. But consumable goods, 3 to 4 years. Software changes, every quarter, and so there's an opportunity there. I think the robustness of stakeholders. You heard my colleagues in the previous session talk a little bit about understanding the stakeholders, understanding the individuals that influence the pathway towards access and adoption. In the med device space, that can be plentiful, and depending on the type of technology that you're supporting, your stakeholders change. It's very different from the payer, physician, patient trifecta. Those things are still true, but there's so many different permutations under each of those categories. And also, depending on the type of devices that you're supporting, you can be servicing a large number of SKUs. And so rationalizing the expense of HEOR activities for a single product can be a challenge, and something that you do need to help organizations understand and overcome by connecting the criticality of HEOR support to the commercial enablement opportunity. And so it's hard to pick just a couple of challenges. I think that those are 3 big categories. But when I think about technologies that are in the development pipeline, I think about things that are truly innovative and things that are incremental innovation. And so I'll answer the question that way. When you are looking at technologies that you believe are truly innovative, something that is solving a problem in a new way or solving a problem that hasn't quite been solved before, it's really important to make sure that your customers understand the problem that you are trying to solve, and they appreciate the magnitude of the unmet need or the opportunity that's on the table. Investing in HEOR too late down that pathway creates a significant hurdle from a commercialization perspective, because you have a great solution without a problem, if you will, or without an understood problem. So you spend the first years on market, instead of driving access to and adoption of that product, driving issue awareness. Something that you can do while you're developing your product, and really compress that pathway to launch excellence and commercial success. A theme that you heard earlier, a theme that will probably be repeated throughout this session and the coming sessions. I think that that's probably the biggest miss for med tech companies, is investing a little too late. Not because it's not understood that we need to make sure that there's issue awareness, but the timeline to be able to establish that burden, understand where the delta is or the gap is between customers' understanding of the unmet need and our ability to articulate it, and how long it takes to get that fact base into a presentable form is often where that misses, and that can take a couple of years. And so I think that's a big one. For those products that are incremental innovations, I think that the opportunity there is to group those technologies together and establish the criticality of what that portfolio set is to the healthcare system. And then start to differentiate in terms of services, differentiate in terms of the ease of use, and looking at other factors beyond the features and benefits of the technology itself, because that's the other big challenge I see. We often get caught up in the features and benefits of the technology and don't take a step back and say what the application is, how it affects the care pathway, and where there are other opportunities to differentiate that surround your technology. And those things are things that require real-world evidence. But again, if you don't start planning for them in the product development process, while you're developing a technology that is going to have that differentiation challenge, you're not going to be able to substantiate your price. And so I would, there's many I can touch upon, but I'm going to stop with those two. And Deepak, back to you.
Thank you, Aarti. I'll come back to you from a question that is on the chat from the last session that is relevant to what you commented. But before that, let me move to Julie. Julie, what's your story? What are the different indications, and what are your personal experiences in terms of the challenges?
Thanks, Deepak, and thank you for the thoughtful comments, Aarti. So to level set, I'm in Bose Health right now, which may be surprising to many folks. It's essentially like working in a bit of a startup under, of course, the umbrella of a reputable organization. And prior to that, I spent about 8 years in medical device, joined Covidian and was subsequently part of the largest divestiture over to Medtronic, and then another subsequent acquisition by Cardinal Health. So for those of you on the phone that have are either in the startup phase or being bought and sold, I can definitely understand and feel your pain and inspiration as well, because I think there's a lot of opportunities to come from that. And prior to industry, I was at the Department of Population Medicine at Harvard Medical School for a decade, so very much entrenched in the research side of things. So in terms of personal experience with different indications, types of products, challenges, I think kind of there's some main barriers to overcome, and then I'll give kind of a really tactical example of kind of a stepwise approach to get there. And I think, everyone's looking for that logical stepwise approach around capturing HEOR, communicating its value and things like that. That's why we're all here. For better or worse, that doesn't exist. And so we're trying to draw a line in the sand in an ever-changing environment. And so kind of what I've inspired my teams to do is around alignment, de-risking and investment, and disruption. So from an alignment perspective, understanding from your sales and marketing colleagues early exactly what you're planning to do in the market. Are you planning to disrupt kind of a well-established category with something new and innovative? Are you truly, fostering some type of brand new intervention? What are they planning from a business model perspective for the ASP for that product to be? And if that product is currently reimbursed, kind of what are those levels of reimbursement that exist? Sometimes there's a disconnect there. And once you've really understood the business strategy and modeling and ultimately pathway to profitability for your company, understand the clinical strategy. What does it take to get FDA approval just to get on the market? And if your company is investing in those large clinical studies, it was alluded to earlier by Gabrielle and others, make sure you can have a seat at the table early and often to integrate some secondary endpoints that can help expedite your HEOR analysis further down the line than having to wait. always better to collect more data than not enough, especially in terms of big investments in your clinicals. In terms of de-risking, I'm a big fan of de-risking your HEOR strategy by investing across diversified payer approaches to overcome different adoption barriers. For instance, say you're selling a product that typically had been covered under a DRG, and you feel that you have enough clinical and economic evidence in your value dossier to create kind of a new type of reimbursement. That needs to be communicated at the payer, the provider, and the facility C-suite level. So those will need different things. Cost effectiveness models, budget impact models, to speak to value analysis committees. Will it require a registry? You know, registries in medical device, I think, are often thought of after the fact, but if you have the appropriate alignment with academic or payer provider research partners, these can be a really powerful tool. Finally, disrupt your product landscape. Drive awareness before your evidence even exists. Get the word out there and publish papers around awareness to the problem you're trying to solve for, so that when your evidence reaches kind of a tipping point, you're able to then swoop in with a valuable and viable solution. And that's all through peer-reviewed collateral and key opinion engagement and alignment. So in thinking tactically about, you know, one way to approach this, had a product, it had historically been categorized as more of a commoditized product, covered under kind of that DRG. And so decided to kind of take a butterfly effect approach and plant a number of different seeds to get the ball rolling on truly driving awareness to the differentiation of this product. So from the public route standpoint, going through CMS to establish a new healthcare common procedure code or HCPCS code. It's a bit of a thankless task sometimes. It's wrought with bureaucracy. Guidelines are fairly unclear, but in the event that you're able to especially apply under significant therapeutic distinction, I think it's well worth it. From a private payer route, membership to private payers, things like Blue Cross Blue Shield's Evidence Street, they're attempting to evolve value dossiers via a coordinated, impartial medical review process that are transparent, efficient, and coordinated. And so you're there with other industry partners that historically you may have been competing with, but it's helping a large payer to synthesize data across industry so that they can really ascertain whether evidence is sufficient to determine effects on the particular health outcome that they're interested in, and ultimately payment and reimbursement. In contrast to CMS, I've actually had a fair amount of success in pursuing some OUS, for instance, NICE MedTech briefings, medical innovation briefings. So in the UK, these are used for payers and providers to quickly kind of assess new technologies. And I've found that bringing kind of those medical innovation briefings at the facility level over to the US is quite provocative and kind of adds a nice global feel and lens to different types of data. And finally, when you are thinking about the facility level, taking those products that are often overlooked and really doing some nice Markov modeling, perhaps, to develop some budget impact that you can personalize the impact to that facility based on the types of patients that they see, and really quantify that in a dollars and cents way to show the economic value beyond just the patient experience to the VAC committee and C-suite.
That's great, Julie. For Julie and Aarti, for both of you, there is a question that came from the last session with Scott and Russ, and I think you both touched into that particular aspect, and I would like you to expand a bit on that. The question from Farah is, how long before a launch would you recommend to initiate collecting health economic data for a product, especially in a local setting? And you both touched on that particular topic of timing, of trying to reuse your data and think about it. So any comments, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can. Oh, Julie, did you want to go?
Oh, I was just going to say early in the product development process. So oftentimes clinicals are undertaken on via a pacer. So it's a product evaluation before release in order to gather the data that the FDA needs. So build it in there as early as possible when the product is kind of being tested in a human subjects way.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo. I would argue that in an ideal state, you would start engaging your HEOR colleagues as a equal thought partner, a strategic partner in really defining the parameters of the technology that you're actually developing. So in idea phase or concept phase of your product development process. And I think that's actually one of the luxuries of being in the medical device space, to really think about the characteristics that our customers value the most and see how much of that we can address through the technology as we develop it is really unique. And it has a lot of potential in terms of driving value. And I would say that the benefit of engaging that early is that you can continue to refine your aspirational value story and continue to test it in the marketplace as you also in parallel develop the technology, so that you understand how much of that value story you're going to be able to hit with your technology. And that will allow you to really get a jump start on your pricing strategy, on pathways to payment, and how all of these things come together in terms of driving commercial excellence and launch success a little further down the path. So a lot of value to engaging early.
Thank you, Aarti. Thank you, Julia. And for all our audience, please have your questions coming in. This is an educational session. Aarti and Julia and all the panel members are over here to answer your questions. So as soon as you send it, we will make sure that we'll put it into the panel. My next question for both of you, we keep on talking about challenges. What are the opportunities here? Especially in this evolving era of pandemic and moving around, people are skeptical about what will be an opportunity for me. So what are the opportunities that you see from where you are sitting right now? Aarti, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I mean opportunities that HEOR brings to the table?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So I actually am going to build on something that Julie mentioned in answering the previous question, which was really around the ability for organizations to work directly with their customers and demonstrate, what the impact of our technology would be for that specific customer. That is something unique to the health economics and outcomes research capability, and it is a part of the sales enablement process. And now more than ever, people are going to be looking for a return on their investment, because now more than ever, resources are truly, truly constrained, and attention is focused on things that, weren't the elephants in the room in the past, right? And so when we look at, incremental innovation, I think that our customers are more and more going to take a, if it's not broken, let's not fix it right now type of approach, because everybody's trying to address whether they need to fix the garage door or the leak in the roof. There's just so many challenges that are in the system today. And so I think the opportunity to leverage HEOR right now is really about helping the customer understand which problem to solve and how the problems link together. So, when we think about, treating COVID patients, how does your technology allow your customer to do that more effectively? Your technology does not have to be COVID related, but if it frees up time, for example, of someone to be focused on a biggest problem that they have right now, if it frees up resources, if it drives efficiency, if it gets other patients away from harm, I mean, we need to think about all of our solutions in the broader system and look at it through the lens of our customers more so than ever. What are they trying to do? What fires are they trying to put out? And working with your HEOR team to think about that systemic challenge and the economies of our current healthcare challenges and how our products fit into that journey, I think will help everyone evolve their value story to be very relevant to customers today. And so that's a huge opportunity, and cracking that, I think, will really help differentiate you as a partner in a time of need.
No, that's really appreciated, because right now everyone is struggling. All the healthcare providers are struggling when it comes to cash flow. And as you rightly said, if something is not broken, does not need a fix, we are not gonna fix it. So in that situation, innovation have challenges and also opportunities to use health economics to their advantage. Julia, to you, what are the opportunities, health economic opportunities from a health economic research perspective that you see in this evolving world?
Yeah, so I'd kind of like to double click on, the evolution of digital therapeutics and how the pandemic is really serving as a catalyst for access to a lot of that different type of care. And so, with the pandemic, we often talk about the new normal. And I think in the case of digital therapeutics, what's happening is simply kind of a catalyst or fast track to what was always intended to be the future normal. We're just having it reeled in much closer from a time perspective than initially anticipated. So as many may be aware, during this past April, the FDA issued guidance to help expand the availability of digital therapeutic devices that were intended for a variety of psychiatric disorders for the duration of the public health emergency declared by HHS. So the guidance as it's written intends to expand the availability of digital health therapeutic devices. And so this could quite possibly be the first time that FDA has ever used such terms in its written policies that actually very explicitly facilitates consumer and patient access to and use of digital therapeutics to reduce exposure to COVID-19, burden on the healthcare system, and everything in between. So from an ATO perspective, I can't think of a better opportunity to really drive that. HEOR is heavily reliant on access. This is kind of, helping to tear away a lot of that red tape to more quickly and rapidly deploy these vital interventions for patients. So things that are covered include anxiety disorders, insomnia, depression, substance abuse, PTSD, autism, ADHD. You can understand it really runs the gamut. And under the temporary policy, these devices don't need to submit a 510K pre-market notification. They don't need to report corrections or removals or register a list with the FDA or comply with UDI requirements. It's kind of music to everyone's ears. These are the things that take so much time. And we're actually being given a great opportunity right now to sprint in a way that we've always wanted to. And so they do outline some very specific requirements around software, appropriate cybersecurity protections and the like. But I really encourage folks to align with their clinical affairs counterparts from an HEO perspective, marketing and sales, and really drive after this or seek opportunities beyond just this very specific facet of digital wellness to see if there could be potential parallel applications in other portfolios that you might deal with.
Thank you, Julie. That's really is a great opportunity for people to, if they are into the digital health and consumer well-being space, they can exploit that. And thank you for bringing that. Let me start with you with the last question for this panel. And for the participants, please, if you have any questions, use the chat function and I will go into those questions after this one. You have worked in academic center, Shuli, and you have also worked in different types of medical devices, digital, now into a field into consumer health and digital health as you are into a startup culture. What are the learnings that you feel from an HEOR perspective that stayed with you? Is it a thought process in dealing with the challenges? So how did HEOR play a critical role in addressing these challenges, whether it is academic, medical devices, or consumer health?
That's a great question, Deepak. I think it's so interesting, right? In academia, you're so focused on those really robust scientific studies, cost effectiveness analyses, very, very dense 20+ page peer-reviewed publications, and those are extremely important, and it's something that every device company aspires and strives for. However, the Achilles heel of academia is sometimes translating those key learnings into health economics that resonates with payers and providers and lay people and patients, right? We almost need in academia some type of marketing and sales organization to kind of tease out and highlight what matters most and why. The inverse is true on industry side. Oftentimes we're spinning our wheels trying to engage with the right key opinion leaders, the right academic institutions to just get the studies underway, and not quite being sure what we should be looking at and how. And I think taking down some barriers between academia and industry, and while we're at it, payers as well, to kind of have that trifecta at the table early and often, because we all have a shared vested interest in better longer term outcomes for patients. Value-based healthcare was the talk of the town before kind of the pandemic hit, and it's definitely still there. It's just, I think now more than ever, something that previously kind of siloed industries and parties need to start to come together on. So I think that's both a common thread and a challenge across different facets is how to best relay your value proposition to the audience in a way that resonates. And it seems simple, but there's just a lot of different layers to work through, both from a scientific validity perspective through just resonating.
Thank you, Julia. These are really great comments, because we see a lot of innovations coming out from universities and thinking of a value in a more of a scientific way, rather than actually talking to the customers to what level of data is actually needed, right? So the balance is difficult, and that's why I threw up that question for you. For Aarti, the similar question, we recognize that being a part of BD, you are looking at a lot of different products as solutions. You have a lot of different stakeholders, call points that you are going through. So how do you tie all of them together into an HEOR? So how does HEOR play a critical role in bringing all those challenges and opportunities together?
So I think that for HEOR as a function to be successful, we need to look at shared goals cross-functionally. I think everybody on this call is interested in ensuring that every patient, every customer has the opportunity to experience the value that we're trying to deliver, so access. And to make sure that people have the chance and do choose to use the technologies that we're creating, and so really driving adoption. And so to make sure that you win on both of those fronts, and to make sure that your customers win on both of those fronts, really working with the regulatory team, working with the medical affairs team, ensuring that your strategy services the marketing plan, and that the access plan is, shaping the marketing plan. I think those types of activities are things that need to happen internally, but if you leave them at just activities, you still won't get to that outcome. It's really about creating a shared joint strategy, and it's a dance, because some of this stuff happens in parallel, but I really look at it like a ladder. So you kind of come together, you know where you're trying to go, some work starts, you re-engage and say, hey, are we still aligned? Are we still moving effectively to that shared goal? And continuing this process, not only when you launch the technology, but throughout the life cycle of that technology. This is one team, one cross-functional team that's driving success for the organization and for your customers. And so, you know, when we think about our regulatory partners, how does HEOR work with regulatory? It's really about whether the claims that we're trying to help substantiate, you know, whether that fits into the regulatory strategy, whether they're thinking about the same thing. Because I think one of the areas where we often fall apart is when we think about whether we're equally focused on all of our stakeholders. So have we equalized our focus on regulatory stakeholders, clinical stakeholders, and payer stakeholders? We often think about the payer stakeholder last because we think about things sequentially, but in fact, all the fact base needs to be built at the same time. So working with regulatory in that way. Same thing with medical affairs. Do we have an integrated medical or evidence generation strategy that includes, you know, KOL development, market shaping, market development, you know, all of those things fall together. And does a commercialization strategy take all of that into account? So I think, you know, whether it's the marketing plan, whether it's that integrated evidence generation strategy or medical plan, I think those are the areas where you go from tactics and you're really turning it into a strategy to get to a shared goal.
Thank you, Aarti. Thank you, Julie, for all your comments. The floor is right now open for questions. So participants, if you have any questions, feel free to type into the chat. While the questions are coming up, there is one question from my side as an innovative company, and Scott corrected me when I did a strategic mistake last time, thinking about HEOR at launch. But I do not have resources as to pursue regulatory, KOL, and meeting with people, talking to investors. So what should we do? Aarti, you have worked both on the pharma and right now in the medical devices where you have a lot of, maybe sometimes you are lack of resources or at least resources are available with you. From Julie's perspective, Julie's kind of in a consumer health, but it is a startup culture out there, building up health. So where should we put our focus on? And I'll start with Aarti, and Julie has a lot to add, but where should I put my focus on?
I think your focus should be on the customer. Truly understanding how your customer defines value is the starting point for how you need to prioritize your efforts in HEOR. So, you know, if it's one thing that you can do, it's, you know, partnering with the investments that you're already making in market research and apply a different lens to it, and say, okay, you know what, we may be bringing this to the table, but so let's take a step back and say, what's our customer actually needing? And, you know, whether this is one of their top 10 priorities to solve. If it's not, how big is the gap? And how much education do we need to do so that it will be a priority when it's time to bring our product to the market? If it won't be a priority by then, what does that mean for us? And how do we need to adjust? Does that change the business case? I think those are all questions that we can answer early, and it'll really help us be very efficient with our investments and be very targeted and focused with where we want to spend time and dollars when it comes to HEOR. Start with the customer.
That's a great point, Aarti. That's a great point, because many a times we forget customer and we start thinking about resources internally. Really valuable suggestion. Julie, what should, according to you, the innovative companies are in the early stage or in the stage where you are right now, where should be the focus?
Right. I would say never underestimate the value of a well-constructed clinical or strategic advisory board, a multi-diversified board, if you will, where you'd have the opportunity to have leaders in your thought field, whether it be from a regulatory perspective, clinical research perspective, HEOR, market access, sales, creating kind of a tiger team, strategic advisory, have more of an objective lens relative to kind of your product and aspirations can be absolutely invaluable in helping to kind of scope out all those kind of diversified yet linked up strategies. And also, if possible, if from a regulatory perspective possible, figure out ways to test and learn in a nimble way through very targeted market fit tests before kind of your broad, widespread product launch. I think there's also some key value and learning that can happen there that can really help to inform blind spots and really reinforce those value propositions that resonate most in the real world.
Thank you, Shirley. Those are really two great suggestions. Focus on your customer and never underestimate the value that a good strategic advisory board brings to you as an innovation. So I'd like to thank both of you. In the interest of the time and the schedule, I would like to move to the next session. For all the participants, even if you at hindsight think of a question for Aarti and Julie, do not hesitate to put your questions in the chat. I will be happy to ask those questions as we move on. Thank you, Aarti and Julie, for your time today. Really appreciate it. It has been always a pleasure getting your ideas across to the entire community.
Thanks, Deepak.
So friends, we heard from Scott and Russ regarding HEOR, and from the context of US healthcare system, we kind of took away that it's a strategic question and we should not be just as a tactical part of it. Aarti and Julie put into perspective the challenges and the opportunities that brings to the table when it comes to the commercial challenges and commercial access. And to Julie's point earlier, which is very pertinent, that the current pandemic has provided some of the opportunities for the medical devices, especially in digital health, with relaxation of regulations to have better access and make the technology accessible for the benefit of the patient. And Aarti rightly said that never forget your customers when you are doing an HEOR strategy of addressing your commercial challenges. With those great insights from the industry side, I want to move our next session into customer focus. We always thought about what the customers are, who the customers are, how do they take a decision. Let me first invite our two great panelists. We have Gloria Graham. She is an industry business education collaborative with EVAP, and she is also on the value analysis committee of Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So, and with her, she brings years and years of experience sitting on the other side of the table. Good afternoon, Gloria. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. And we have Barbara Strain. Barbara is a principal consultant at Barbara Strain Consulting LLC, but as you will learn from her background pretty quickly, about years of experience she has being a part of a value analysis committee. So the major focus over here for all the medical devices companies and our community of medical devices is to understand your customer, and who better than Barbara and Gloria to help us understand what their needs are. So I'd like to give floor to Gloria first. Gloria, if you can help people understand a bit about your background, your experiences, your challenges, tell your story to the audience out here.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for being here and inviting us to kind of share our perspective, from the provider side. My background is I've been a registered nurse at Cincinnati Children's for 31 years. Primarily, I've been an ER trauma nurse there at the facility, and over the past years, transitioned into a role within value analysis under the Division of Supply Chain for Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and have been working in that role since. And early on, when I made the transition, I got involved with the Professional Association for Healthcare Value Analysis Professionals, called the AVAP. And since that time, have remained active in the association. I'm one of the past presidents of the association and currently chair the Industry Business Education Collaborative that Deepak spoke about early on. And, our goal within AVAP is, one of our mission is to help educate the healthcare community in both a clinical capacity as well as on the supplier side around the world of the value analysis committees and the value analysis process, and how to navigate that process, because we do recognize there are sometimes, as it appears, a possibility that it's a barrier, and we don't want that to come off as being a barrier, but we want to help educate so that everyone understands how to navigate that process, so that our partnership, our relationship with the supplier community is valuable, and we need that in order to achieve the outcomes that all of the hospitals, have set for them.
Thank you, Gloria. I move on to Barbara. Barbara, help people understand about your background and about your experiences.
Great. Well, thanks, Deepak, for inviting us. Gloria and I have been texting back and forth this morning because everybody said so many exciting things, and we go, but the customer's coming, we're here. So before becoming an independent healthcare value consultant, I spent 40 years in the provider. My background is scientific. I'm a clinical microbiologist who worked in various provider organizations. And then the last 21 or 2 years, I've spent heavily in value management and value analysis principles. I'm one of the founding members and past presidents of AVAP that Gloria spoke to. And we've really put a lot of emphasis both in our provider environments as well as our AVAP environments of really working with manufacturers, suppliers, whether it's a product or service, and really working together, because it's really a three-legged stool in healthcare. In order for healthcare organizations to exist and for patients to get care, you need the supplier and manufacturer organizations, but we also need that value analysis and value principles in order to survive out there. So the last few years, I've specialized in disruptive and new technology, both from acceptance and implementing at an academic medical center, as well as the last couple of years in consulting.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Gloria. Great to have you here. You are right, Barbara. People have been talking about understand your customer, and here you are. And thank you for being part of this group, because we kind of learn a lot from you as industry, right? So there are a lot of people who have joined, and the participants who have joined outside of the US, and even within the US, there is less amount of visibility of understanding who a value analysis committee is. So Barbara, let me start from you. Can you help, let's define value analysis committee and its composition for the team, and what are the different kinds that you see throughout different academic centers, right?
Sure, I'll start off with that, and then Gloria has a little bit of expertise in that and kind of talks about those sorts of things too. So we make a good little partnership here. So value analysis committees, I just want to say it's almost a misnomer in a way, because what the manufacturers and the suppliers really need and working on is working with the value analysis professionals at the various organizations. The value analysis professionals, along with their executive leadership and key departments in the hospital, put together value analysis committees based on either service line needs or ad hoc initiatives like in orthopedics or neurosurgery, cardiology, et cetera, or other initiatives. So the actual committee part is a little bit different sort of connotation than maybe what people think it is. Normally in situations in most healthcare organizations, the supplier really doesn't address and come to a value analysis committee unless there's a special, need that might have to be demonstrated or something. So primarily the customer internally at a hospital organization is those value analysis professionals. It can be one, it can be several, and they're usually in some sort of a program, again, along with their executive leadership, physicians, technologists, nurses, bedside folks, as well as finance, revenue cycle, all of those sorts of attributes. And so our role as value analysis professionals is to understand those dynamics in our institution and how can we really address value. So committees, a main committee is usually what we call an executive level steering committee. So it's those C-suite folks that are helping to have everybody understand what are all the goals of the institution, what are all the strategic goals we're trying to reach over time, and then how do we work on them together. And value analysis brings what I call, and people might say, HEOR to the provider organization. So before Gloria and I and AVAP started partnering with ISPOR and Alira and MassMEDIC and those sorts of folks, we weren't really cognizant of an HEOR sort of environment. Again, it started basically in the pharma industry. We're really happy it's moving into the medical device industry because value analysis is really doing that whole value story for their own organization on each product. So we were the ones collecting all the evidence. We were the ones doing all of the data and analytics and everything. So Gloria and I were really happy to see about HEOR coming about in the SIG group of ISPOR and other organizations such as some of the manufacturers that are represented in this webinar today, because they're actually now bringing the value story. And the way we like to look at the value story is what's really important. And so Gloria and I and others who have sat in provider organizations, I estimate I've probably sat through 15,000 or more manufacturer presentations, and they're at a whole different level than they used to be. So what happens, I'll let Gloria kind of talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, Deepak, about how the role and structure of value analysis committees sort of work.
Definitely. Gloria, help us understand the structure and the role and your take on the value analysis committee. We heard from Barbara, you also have a lot of experience in that. So help us understand those.
Sure. So let's just start first by talking a little bit about the structure. And Barbara alluded to that when she started talking about that executive level. Most value analysis programs will kind of start out at the top with some sort of steering committee. Some may call it an executive committee. And as Barbara alluded to, that is the C-suite, a lot of the individuals that are involved with that. Typically, it also includes the chairs of the different smaller committees under that structure. And that's where the tone for the program is established. They help, as Barbara talked about, looking at strategically the goals for the organization for that year. And they're also a guide and a help with the overall program to really ensure that the value analysis process and program is infused throughout enterprise-wide, and to ensure that the staff understand the importance of the value analysis program, and working with them to ensure that they are utilizing the value analysis program and not kind of circumventing this, as that sometimes happens. And then under that particular structure, under that executive level, there are typically various teams. One thing I want to say about the value analysis process or program is every individual organization will be different. I come from a standalone pediatric academic medical center. My structure is going to look different than a large IDN that has multiple hospitals that are spread across multiple states. But we all take the same principles and the same foundation of the structure and apply it and individualize it based on what your organization looks like. So while there may be one, say, executive committee for a large IDN, and then their value analysis teams maybe would be split up in between each different hospital. Or in my scenario, in a standalone, we have our executive level team, and then we have smaller teams that are broken down by care lines, such as Barbara talked about. We have a respiratory value analysis team that deals with a lot of the respiratory products and devices. We have a perioperative, we have a laboratory team. So some hospitals may have 10 or 12 different teams that are based on care line services. Others may have 4 or 5. It just really depends on kind of what and how they want to set it up. But most of the time you will see a structure where you have an executive oversight with the smaller teams, and then the work kind of gets pushed down to those teams. So not only are the teams working on projects based from the executive committee, but such as what we've been talking about today, and everyone is talking about the new that may be coming out onto the market, those teams are also looking at all of the new requests and all of the new products that are being potentially brought into the organization. So that's a little bit about the structure, and then the role again within how it works is, there are steps within the process that each of the value analysis teams have to go through in order to be able to achieve that value proposition that everyone's been talking about today. And those steps really help guide to ensure that when they are at the point of making the decision, they have all of the data, whether that's clinical data around, when we do finally get to that point to where we do have more of the HEOR data available at our fingertips, will be, I think, just a great day in value analysis when we get there. And take that clinical information as well as the financial information and have to blend those two together for the committee, and not the value analysis staff, but it is the group of the clinicians that are making the decision on all of the data and the evidence and information that is brought to them, and they're the ones that then make the decision on what's best for patient population and the organization as a whole. So, I concur wholeheartedly with what Barbara was talking about. To hear, what Russ and Scott was talking about, how, having that information and having the HEOR information earlier on in the start of the medical device development and getting clinician input early on in that process, I think is probably some of the most valuable information that, I think if we can, share and leave with everyone today would be great.
Thank you, Barbara, Gloria, on discussing on that topic, where you literally brought to the view to look at value analysis professionals within a hospital system as your collaborator and bringing the information together in front of a value analysis committee for a decision making. Now, while in the procurement process, and it goes into the question of a procurement process, what will be that collaboration look like, right? So can the innovations and the medical devices or digital healthcare have a direct access to the value analysis professionals and have a visibility on what the hospital needs from them? Or is there a platform available for them to discuss? So many a times, medical devices company, yes, we understand value analysis committees, we understand value analysis professionals. How do we collaborate with them? So what are the platforms available?
I'll start that off if that's okay. This is the question we get asked all the time. Manufacturers and suppliers, distributors, those who call on hospitals all the time, they have a hard time trying to get to the value analysis professional. Sometimes they're not called that in an organization. They might be called a clinical material expert or a director of other sort of departments. So one of the best advice we give anyone trying to start out is everybody usually either knows supply chain, material management, purchasing, contracting, but they should ask for who in your organization really looks at clinical products or clinical services. And then they can mention value analysis and those sorts of things. Too often they are probably told, well, we're not going to let you talk to them, or we're not going to put your call through or whatever, because they think it's just a cold sales call. So we always tell our fellow providers, you need to make it very evident that when a supplier contacts any of you, please send them to our way, because we can triage that call. We would rather do that than we get a call from a physician who says, I just got a call from this company. And the physician is always going to be nice. They're not going to be curt with the supplier or whatever. They're going to, nod as you can on a call and that sort of thing. But then they'll come and tell us, or please contact Barbara, please contact Gloria or whatever. So it is a little difficult. So we're trying through AVAP to educate our provider members that they have to make it much more evident that that's who they need to get in contact with. Eventually it gets to the right people. And once someone figures that out, then it's very easy to do. But we can do things in reverse. When there is a need for, say, a contract to be renewed, or if there's a need for a product that we currently don't have, or we're looking at a certain market because we're getting a different patient market because we have new physicians, or we're starting up a new service, then there's RFPs that can go out, RFQs that can go out. We have group purchasing organization resources. We have other third-party resources. So providers can also reach out into organizations. So if the two are both sort of trying to contact, eventually it all works out. The main thing, and I told Gloria that whenever we got the opportunity, I was going to mention this one fact first. So before we get all the way through and we haven't mentioned it, we always want to make sure, and our value proposition is clearly defined and is used in every circumstance, whether we're looking at one product, a whole line of products, we're trying to resolve something, is we profess in value is equal to quality divided by cost. And when you look at it in healthcare, because that's in either value engineering, value analysis across any industry, but in healthcare, that quality is really related to those outcomes that my organization would need to resolve. It's also related to safety of the patient and the staff, and it's also related to all of the service. And in order to do that, I know the costs that go into achieving those outcomes. And so that's what value analysis does, is they are the keeper of that value equals quality divided by cost. And it goes all the way back when we're talking about HEOR and the new devices, whether you're a brand new company or you're disruptive or whatever, you really need to look at those things because those are the gaps. And I think Julie and others have mentioned this, that what do we really need? And individually, we're all going to need something different. So don't assume that we absolutely need what you have to offer. So together, we all need to do this, but we're making it easier and easier to help find the value analysis folks. If anything at all positive have come out of COVID over the last almost 9 months, I can't believe I'm saying that, we almost birthed a baby here, is that they have learned who value analysis is. Because value analysis is the one that have been vetting the suppliers, vetting the products, being there to make sure that all those community donations were taken care of, that the staff had what they needed in PPE and things, and that sort of the keeper of the quality of the products and things.
Paula, you rightly mentioned the quality by cost, and this is what drives a lot of value analysis committees, and it's a good way of integrating any health economics data, understanding you as a customer, what a quality and what a cost means for you. And I would like to extend to Gloria on that concept. Gloria, when you are evaluating a technology from a clinical standpoint, from a patient access standpoint, and there is a cost standpoint, where does the pricing discussion comes? Is the pricing discussion comes from a perspective of what it will cost from an overall healthcare perspective, or perspective, or procurement? So when does that pricing discussion comes?
Sure. So we really look at the cost perspective, kind of from the whole totality of it, from a total cost of ownership, not just the cost of the isolation or the product by itself. I will say in my experience and what I have learned from the clinicians that I work with is I don't always lead with information about cost unless it is a project that we are working on that everybody knows we're working on this to reduce the cost of X, and we're going to try it through different avenues, utilization, other ways. But the majority of the time, what is most successful within the value analysis process, from my experience, is leading the discussion around the clinical outcomes. What is our current outcome? What is the process now around how we use this device? Are there problems with it? Are we not able to achieve, this targeted outcome? So we typically start in the process, when you look at the 5-step methodology that AVAP has, you begin to gather that information in the steps. However, that part of the analysis doesn't come in until a little bit later, because you're really trying to identify initially, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it that, again, is it around a strategic initiative that we have? Are we seeing a decline in a certain infection rate or an increase in the infection rate? So you're really trying to identify, you're trying to gather all of the information around it, and kind of simultaneously in the process, while we're working with the clinicians to kind of gather all of this information, you typically have your contracting staff and your analysts that's also beginning to build that cost effectiveness type of report, to where they're pulling in all of the cost. What does it look like? And then as you move through the process, when you get to the point of the decision, we have to take in, like I talked about, that total cost of ownership. Because if we're looking at that this will improve, and we have data, we have evidence, we have evaluation, data that shows us this will improve our outcomes if we convert to this item, then we have to take that into consideration when we look at the cost of the conversion. What about all of the education that has to take place? And there's so many other kind of soft costs behind the process of implementing or bringing on, kind of onboarding a new device or a new, product. So while it begins to happen, and that is collected pretty early on, it's really towards the kind of the middle part of where that decision is being made, where not only the cost, but also the clinical piece of it is brought in to help the clinicians make the decision.
Well, that's really helpful, Gloria, because many a times we think about cost in a very different way, and we do not kind of take into consideration what is actually happening in the minds of value analysis professionals. And maybe you have a service agreement with a particular devices that you just cannot get rid of as of now, even if the technology is great, and you have to live through it. So understanding customers and understanding how you explain cost and the quality is critical. Let me move to the next question. And you both tried to cover all these three in your discussions. But I have a question from audience, and that I will like to put in front of you. Anne K asked us this question. Barbara mentioned that Value Analysis Committee also is responsible for ensuring the technology is implemented across the organization. How is this implementation aspect assessed by a committee? How is it executed? How is the success in brackets value measured as a follow-up and after the decision is being made? And how can the technology company support this aspect? So just to summarize, NK is looking forward to your role in implementation of a technology, understanding its value, and is there an opportunity for the technology companies to actually collaborate with you?
Sure. So that's a loaded question. Lots of different aspects there.
Yeah.
So when we look at a specific technology, we're looking at where in our patient population. Is it a hospital-based product? Is it ambulatory surgery? Is it clinics, or is it ancillary areas or whatever? How far and wide or how narrow is the focus of that particular technology? And we put all of that into our calculations, including what Gloria said as far as the actual cost of conversion. It could be that we're entirely standardized to a certain product across the board. And the reason why we did that might have been because a product may start in the OR environment. So it's very necessary for certain applications in a procedure. However, when that patient then goes to either an inpatient location, goes to home health, a clinic or whatever, that product still might need care afterwards. So if we're not careful and we change something at the root of where that product starts out in an organization and forget about the limbs of the tree where the patient might reside later, it upsets the whole balance of all that quality that we've achieved. So how the manufacturer or the technology company can help is already have thought about all of the different care areas their product works in. It could be that there's a slightly different version that does the same thing, but it works better in an outpatient area. Maybe it's a certain type of catheter and how it's used or how it's taken care of and maintained versus in the hospital setting. So that's all part of that value story. The company is very integral in all of the in-servicing education, but it's not leaving the institution once all that's done and saying, okay, we made that conversion. It's really having business meetings on several intervals and checking in and how it's going and doing additional education that might be needed. Or if there's going to be a change in version and there's a slight difference in how the product's going to be used, need to be very transparent and let us know so that we can help plan what are those further education opportunities going to be.
Yeah, and if I can kind of tag on to that and really talk about, you know, the last step of the value analysis process is talking about how you monitor or sustain what you've just implemented. And Barbara highlighted that perfectly, is that you have to build into that process. If we convert on, you know, November 1st to a new product or device because we're saying it's going to decrease our, say, catheter-associated bloodstream infections. And we then have to set up a process in order to determine, is it 6 months, is it 8 months, is it a year later that we're going to go back and monitor. So we know pre-implementation what our current infection rates are around, you know, by using what we're currently using. And now we're going to switch and we have that intervention on your graph where you've made a change. And then we go back a year later or whatever the date might be, and then we look at those and monitor those infection rates throughout that whole year to determine, did we achieve what we set out to achieve at the very beginning? Was it a clinical outcome, like say a reduction in some sort of, you know, HAPU or HAC, or was it a cost reduction or a utilization reduction? And so that is an integral part of the value analysis process, is to ensure that you have achieved the success in whatever the implementation or conversion would be. And, you know, without that, you know, you won't be as successful as far as being able to really achieve that value story that we've been talking about throughout the day and really achieving that quality over cost.
That's great. That's great, Gloria and Barbara. I know Barbara has to leave at 1 o'clock. So we will open it for the questions. I will have questions for Gloria too. Barbara, any last words before you are leaving us at 1?
I do have a partner in crime that's covering for me at 1 o'clock for a few minutes, but what I really wanted to talk about a little bit was that sort of disruptive technology that we've alluded to that may not have clinical evidence, may not have, you know, peer-reviewed articles, and that sort of thing. Is how do we really look at that? There are some organizations that basically may not look at them at all. There are others that have the foresight to know that if you adopt a new disruptive technology or just a new technology that may not sort of qualify in our clinical evidence-based sort of part of the story, then we really get down to, but what is it really going to do for us? And so I'll give you a great example. The role of obstructive sleep apnea in a compounding variety of diseases, cardiac and other diseases. If you can get at the root cause of how you could either cure or make the condition of obstructive sleep apnea better or more predictable to diagnose and those sorts of things, you can prevent a lot of unneeded expense due to mortality and morbidity, resulting in high hospital costs. So just by looking at one disease. So now there's several companies over the last 3 or 4 years that have come up with home sleep tests, things that can be done in a non-operative way or an operative way to actually cure or at least convey a better outcome for these individuals. Cardiology is very interested in that direct correlation and things. So if we can make those connection points and we can keep patients in their community, in their environments, and not all the time readmitting them to the hospital where the hospital is the highest cost. Those are the factors across the board. If we have been known to pay a higher cost for the initial product or procedure, if it's going to mean all those downstream costs are saved. And that's in that total value. So I didn't want to leave before I got to mention those things, because I know that we probably have a lot of small and medium size companies who are either in that early stage of development of products and those sorts of things. And this is why the professionalism of value analysis and AVAP and organizations such as that are so important, because we look at the total. So we've been going from volume-based procedures and things, the more you do, the more money you make, to really going to value-based. So we're looking at that whole continuum. And where can we along the line get rid of that variation and waste? And maybe it's that next new thing that's out there that's going to close those gaps.
Yeah. And if I can real quickly, Deepak, just to kind of tag into on that, you know, especially from my perspective, being in a pediatric academic medical center, you know, we don't always have the luxury of having access to evidence within the pediatric population, because there's not a lot of, obviously, studies that are done within that. So, you know, tagging on to what Barbara says is, you know, that's where we as the value analysis professional can help to make that connection. While we don't have the evidence, but we can still take and present this new technology to the right service line or the right care line to say, hey, here's something new that I think, you know, for you guys to take a look at. And so we, as the value analysis professional, can be instrumental in helping, you know, because we have that wide lens now of not only a clinical background, you know, but now having the business and the finance side, and we are able to kind of blend all that together so that we can get those new medical devices or technology in front of the clinicians, especially when we feel like it's going to be applicable to the population that we serve.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Chloe, for your great comments. What the major takeaway for the industry out here is to not to see you as someone evaluating their technology, rather than to come to you to collaborate and get access to the value analysis professionals. We have open for the questions. We have 5 minutes left till the questions come around, and Anke did ask a pertinent question that we made it a part of our panel. I have one question for you, Chloe, from an innovator perspective. When I go and discuss with value analysis professionals, Do they give me certain tools, for example, a checklist to work with, or something that they have worked on their, let's say, this is what we need to see? Do the value analysis professionals empower innovations in that way?
So, I will start off by saying, there are varying levels of maturity of value analysis programs that medical device, manufacturers and suppliers will come in cross to. And I think it's important for them to understand that there are some organizations that will have a value analysis program that is very new and can go all the way up to, the very advanced, population kind of managed process. And while there isn't an industry standard around, say, some sort of checklist that we look for or can hand over the supplier to say, okay, here's all of the information, that we would like from you. There are some common things, and I know Barbara is actually going to be talking on this, that we're looking to develop some sort of kind of value analysis pack, so to speak, of what is the information, and kind of calling it a backpack to determine what are the things that is most beneficial, that when you are getting in touch with that value analysis professional, here are the things that is most helpful to us that we can then distribute and share with our clinicians to determine and figure out or identify if there is a need in this solution. So while I can't say that there's a definite, it's this, and this, we are working on that, but, obviously some of the things are around, application of the product, especially from my perspective. If you're meeting with someone who works in a pediatric institution, you have to take into consideration the population that we serve. Yes, the majority of our patients are pediatrics, but most of us also have the tiniest of neonate. And yes, we even serve all the way up to the adult population. So having information and the application and how you can serve the different types of, patients around, the evidence around what other children's hospitals may be using this product. Those are just kind of a couple things that typically we ask for. And hopefully soon, AVAP, we will be able to establish, the standard of work around what is it that is most beneficial for the value analysis professionals that the supplier can bring to the table.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Barbara, for your great insights. I will take one of the comments from Barbara, like the focus has moved from volume to value. And that's a great segue for our next session. I would like to thank Gloria and Barbara for all your great work that you do along with AVAP, and coming into this platform and helping educate a lot of companies who are in this as participants, and to whom the content will also be available, to understand you as a value analysis professional and not as someone who is just evaluating their technology. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
So friends, we move on to our next session, and we segue into changing payment systems. With me for this session to go forward, we have Ed Hedbrom. He's a Senior Director, Market Access of Value-Based Solutions at 3M Solutions Division at 3M. Ed, I'm so sorry if I didn't get your last name correct. Really
That's perfect. Thank you.
And we have Luis Jaques. Luis is the Chief Clinical Officer at Alira Health LLC, and you will learn from both of their background, their tremendous exposure into changing payment systems and traversing through that through a value-based engagement. So I would like to welcome both of you onto the panel. And before we move on into the discussion, I just wanted to set the stage of where we traveled today, starting at 10:30 in the morning. It has been a long time to all our participants who have been over here. Thank you for being here, and I hope every part of this is value adding to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function and send across those questions to us. I would include it in our panel discussion. In this panel today, we moved on from HEOR to commercial challenges to understanding customers. But many a times, innovations face this daunting task of looking at the changes in the payment systems. And they realize, are we moving towards something else? Um, how can I use my data if I traverse through changing payment systems? Do I understand those payment changing systems? Do I understand how provider and payer interact among themselves? How do they contract among themselves? And this is critical from a medical devices company, because you learn from Gloria and Barbara. You are the people who are enabling them into entering into different agreements with payers. So I would like to welcome Ed and Luis. And before we move on, I would like to give Ed first the platform to help us understand his personal experiences and his dealing with changing reimbursement landscapes, not only here in the US, but also globally. Ed.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today. And just to echo the comments made at the beginning of the meeting, I think the value of this kind of context is really the dialogue, and bringing together a community to solve some of these problems is really valuable. So thanks to ISPOR and MassMEDIC and Alira. So as it says here, I lead our global market access and value-based solutions team. So we actually do have a structure where we have a value-based solutions group within our team. And kind of a little bit of my background, I'm a clinical pharmacist by training. Got my start in the pharmaceutical industry at AstraZeneca, moved over to Aetna, and was the chief pharmacy officer there, and then transitioned into medical devices and have been at 3M Healthcare for about 17 years now. So majority of my career now has been in med device. I've had a long history of participation in ISPOR. And you may, as some of you recognize my name, I was one of the original editors of the ISPOR Book of Terms, and feel fortunate to have had an opportunity to participate in that. 3M is maybe not known as a big healthcare player, but it's actually one of our largest businesses within 3M. And the portfolio is really very broad-based. A lot of it is medical consumables, but most recently with the acquisition of KCI, we're now the largest provider of wound care, largely on the back of the vacuum-assisted closure product portfolio. So that's just a little bit of my background, and I'm looking forward to having a discussion with the team today about the value-based procurement and this whole value-based landscape. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Moving on to Luis. Luis, if you can help us explain your experiences, a long experience over here, and how are your changing reimbursement landscapes is affecting your experience in dealing with different products?
Sure. Thanks, Deepak. I come to this from a Medicare point of view because I ran Medicare national coverage at CMS from 2009 to 2014. And before that, I ran the part of Medicare coverage that deals with a lot of durable medical equipment and physician drugs and diagnostics. The challenge with engaging CMS on HEOR is that fee-for-service Medicare is cost blind by longstanding policy. We did not consider economic data when making national coverage determinations, except in the context of screening and prevention, where Congress had explicitly sort of given the secretary direction and permission to do so. So one of the more frequent questions that I would get, both back then from people who would come in to see us and now from clients, is, well, I'm thinking of doing this HEOR analysis. How do I do this for Medicare? And we would tell them essentially, well, it should terrify you as a taxpayer, but Medicare is cost blind. But that said, Medicare is very sensitive to clinical outcomes. And fundamentally, when you look at an HEOR analysis, what you're doing is you're applying a cost structure to a diverse group of clinical outcomes, whether that's rehospitalization, reimplantation, the need to go to an emergency room, a longer length of stay. So what we would tell people is go ahead and do your HEOR study, because we know you need to do that for the commercial payers. But for Medicare, when you come in, back your outcomes back to those inputs before you costed them, and talk to CMS about how you're reducing hospitalizations, how you're doing all the rest of those things. Because frankly, everybody walks in and says they're going to save money. I never had anyone walk into my office and tell me that they were going to explode the Medicare trust fund. Okay. I mean, if everybody saved as much money as they claimed they would, our taxes would have gone down by now.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for those comments. No, it is critical to understand Medicare perspective on this, right? So people many a times think that where the HEOR will resonate and where it will not, and how they can tie up those studies in promoting value. Ed, coming back to you, and you as a part of 3M and otherwise have dealt with value-based healthcare and its evolvement throughout, and the way it has evolved in the medical devices industry. Can you let the participants know how critical and how the movement has been?
Yeah, I'll reflect on a couple different things. I guess the first one would be to a little bit of advice is within your organization is really establish a kind of a common language on value-based care, value-based procurement, value-based contracting. I mean, all of these things, what we found is that they're kind of poorly understood or partially understood. And if you don't harmonize on the language of it, you really have a hard time communicating. And so we actually put together a glossary. And then the next thing we did is we put together a presentation on it and kind of upskilled our organization on what we thought it was. And I mean, it's funny because the working title for the presentation was value-based everything, right? It's like, so we just said, well, what do we mean by that? What does it mean to us? So let's have a common language. So we did that. If we look back on this whole area, it's really this battle between commodity and value, a long battle, right? And we've been working on this for a long time. And so even within the bid and tender process, we've been moving from what a product's technical specs are to what the product kind of does, and now what the product's outcomes are. And we actually had some luck in Europe with establishing a value-based tender in 2019. It was about a 2-year project where we moved from one of our product platforms, which was very much built off specs, with the GPO in Europe to establish what we believe was one of the first value-based tenders. And that process really was one of a demonstration. So we got this on the table with this group. We did a demonstration project. Then there was a pause and they put it out for bid in terms of, so they actually were able to scope out how they wanted to measure the outcomes. And then, companies came back in and bid on that, and we were able to secure that and win that bid. But it's a long-standing battle, and I just want to bring forward, for those that remember, this whole idea of disease management, which was a really big thing in the pharmaceutical industry in the 90s and the early 2000s. This idea of shifting from price and volume to one of value is not a new one, right? So it's been around a while. So it's a little bit been rebranded, and I think it's really gotten some momentum in the past few years with pay for performance, which has given this a real kick to move it forward. And coinciding with that, more and better data to measure the performance of products. And so I think that that provided the next big wave where people could really start to work on in this area of value-based healthcare. And so I think that we've seen here in Minnesota, which is where 3M is based and where I live, just within the past month, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, which is the largest insurer in the state, and Alira, which is the largest provider in the state, enter into a value-based agreement. That's a 6-year agreement, which is a pretty long agreement as these go. So they're moving there. And so what that focuses us is to say, oh, okay, we need to fit ourselves into the context of this type of an arrangement. So how do our technologies help Blue Cross or Alira or both achieve the clinical outcomes and the value that they're hoping to achieve? And so it's a new framework. So we look upon this and we say, how can we help our customers solve their most stubborn problems? And what can we do as a company, both with with a single product, multiple products, or multiple products and the relationship with the company in terms of our insights into care delivery and an ability to measure what's going on. So maybe I'll stop there and as I've been kind of talking for a while. I'm not used to talking this much, but so just maybe stop there and let Luis make some comments as well, and then we can kind of go back and forth. But there's really a lot here, right, in terms of what the evolution has been, and it's a really exciting time.
Ed, I liked your comment on 6 years, because one of the things that's become apparent when you look at medical devices is that you don't often know the actual impact clinically, and thus you can't always fully appreciate the economic impact until significant numbers of post-market studies are done. So, whether you look at metal on metal hips or drug-coated balloons, where much of the literature in the last year was on worse mortality and worse amputation, or whether you look at non-invasive gynecologic surgery, where FDA last year put out a notice that the cancer outcomes were actually worse, even though the more short-term outcomes are obviously, more appealing with a closed rather than an open procedure. I think it does suggest that payers are going to want to take a long look. And I was in a conversation with a retired commercial plan medical director last week, and he said, most of the time commercial plans keep talking about 2-year windows, 2-year windows. Gee, everybody leaves in 2 years. But he said the issue is that chronically ill patients don't want to change their insurance because they finally have everything figured out. They can go to this doctor, they can go to this hospital. Everybody knows what's going on. If there's a deductible, they met it long ago. And those people tend to stay around for quite a long time.
No, that's completely understandable, and thank you for the comments over there. It's a long journey to land in a value-based contract, and it's a long journey to enable that. I would like to know from Luis, from his part of the way when it was evolving, and we have various value-based arrangement between Medicare and value-based program came around. And now when you are on this side of helping companies out on their reimbursement, how do you see medical devices playing a role in enabling those value-based contracts between providers and payers? Can they play a role in the first place?
I mean, I think they can play a role. I think it's more likely that the payer will be the connection between the providers and the companies. So, for example, when I was at CMS, there were a number of technology companies who came in because they wanted to talk to the Center for Innovation because they wanted to do some sort of demonstration. And what they would be told consistently from those folks is, we don't do demonstrations around a technology. We don't build models around a technology. We build models around provider responses to payment incentives. So while a particular technology might be used by a payer if it has improved outcomes and reduced costs, the model itself is not about the technology. It's about the disease and the provider's management of that disease. So there was always a bit of a disconnect. There was an interesting model in it's really the Blue Cross plan in Maryland. It's Care First. Between Care First and a very large statewide network of urologists and a laboratory company that developed a prognostic test for prostate cancer. In other words, in a clinical context, after the patient has an elevated PSA, how do you decide who actually needs to have a biopsy or not? So they collaborated going forward. It's much easier to collaborate going forward with the payer than to do all your stuff in isolation and then dump it in the payer's lap and say, look, here's our value proposition. And the payer was able to get the urologist on board, and they actually, for a period of time, covered this test in a limited fashion around a particular population. And they decided later on that, in fact, you could avoid something like 20 to 25% of prostate biopsies, many of which clinically turn out to be unnecessary. And they then stopped the demonstration and just started covering this test going forward. So I think there's certainly advantages if you're doing it to actually plan it with a specific provider in mind. And what many of our clients do is they'll pick one or two providers and they'll pick one or two payers where there may be a unique synergy that may be possible. Because the thought is, for example, with Blues plans, you know, after you've succeeded in a few Blues plans, the rest of them tend to just play follow the leader, and they don't require you to reprove it in every plan.
Luis, that's interesting, and you touched a really great point of alignment between payer, provider, and what your technology can provide them to do that. If that alignment is missing, it's difficult. So the best suggestion for any company out here who is looking for any such kind of taking advantage of those payment systems or evolving payment system is to start aligning with them, right? And you rightly mentioned, with one payer, if it goes around, it will go around with different payers of the Blue Cross Blue Shield or United or any other healthcare plan. That brings me to the next question, and I will start that with Ed over here. Ed, you have had experience of closing some of those value-based contracts, and you have seen in the industry people doing that. To what extent are they using health economic and outcome research to close it and to further maintain it? So I'd like to get your perception of how did it actually happen, how much data is actually needed, and how much data is needed to maintain those.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Let me kind of start by kind of a hypothesis related to value, and I've been kind of challenging our team with this, which is to say that, you know, at some point the paradigm's going to shift where today we're the ones that do all the research and tell our customers what the value of our technologies are, you know, and through this, we need to remember they're the ones that are collecting all the data. They have all the data. And so when is it that we show up at the door and they say, wait, stop. We already know what the value of technology is. We're measuring it every day, right? They haven't done that yet, but they have the data and they could at some point. So what we've said is we need to identify kind of how we want it to be measured. What are the methods that we want to measure our technology? And so that when that day occurs, whether we want to accelerate it or whether we want to slow it down, whatever it is, we know whether they're doing it properly or not. So we almost need to have a methods on how we're going to measure the value of our technology in a real world environment, in a health plan or in a hospital system. And when we look at it, health economics is front and center for sure. And it's almost like a combination of a real world study meets an ISPOR. We have to look at the economic benefits and the clinical benefits and the patient reported outcomes. So these could be somewhat complex. And so very much so we see health economics playing a critical role in measuring value. Yeah, without a doubt.
That's great. Luis, I will ask more not from a health economics point of view. I'll ask there are a lot of companies who have joined us and have been seeing movement in terms of payment reforms here in the US. What they should look at? Let's say what should be on their top of their mind when coming into the US market and looking at the payment systems that is evolving or changing, what they should look at. Do they follow CMS guidance? Is there a proper way to consult with someone? So what is the thing that you will tell them that these are the changing rules and they need to see where they play?
Well, I think unfortunately, U.S. healthcare is as chaotic as it may appear from outside our borders. It's like going to a three-ring circus and deciding whether you look at the elephants or the clowns or the lions or the trapeze artist, and it's all a distraction. One of the consistent things in healthcare here is it's extraordinarily politicized and it's very partisan. And what we have seen in the past is political parties criticizing things that they had previously supported when they were in power, and they would have gotten the credit for the accomplishment, but they don't want someone else to get the accomplishment, so they suddenly turn into naysayers. And I think that's part of the chaos here. Now, to some extent, Medicare opened the door to value-based payment in the same way that Medicare, in some sense, opened the door to prospective payment bundles with diagnostic-related groups. And I think in the old days, one could depend on Medicare to sort of crack the door open, and then the commercial payers would all start doing the same thing. I've had some conversations with some colleagues on the private side, in the private insurance side, and our conversations tend to be Medicare has opened the door on value-based engagements, but Medicare seems unable to actually accomplish much there. Sometimes because of Congress. For example, there is a section of the Affordable Care Act that explicitly prohibits Medicare from looking at quality adjusted life years. Okay, obviously that's going to make things a little bit more complicated if you want to talk about some particular benefit for a group of patients based on an intervention. So the thought is that the commercial payers are probably the ones who are going to continue to move the ball forward, and that at some point as a manufacturer or as a provider, especially if a significant amount of your market is in a commercial space, you will find it inefficient to have two very different bifurcated marketing strategies, one value-based for commercials and one non-value-based for Medicare. And at some point, it's just easier for you and easier internally to have one value-based paradigm, and then Medicare will sort of ride on the coattails of the commercial benefit without having to fight the political battles. But that is a cynical view of American healthcare. But unfortunately, I think we deserve it.
No, Liz, that actually speaks about why people are more engaging with private payers on one hand to put their values forward, and trying to drive the point to the policymakers that it is not only about looking the other way from quality. Ed, this is our last question before when we get some question from our audiences. If when your interactions with and your way of interaction with private payers, as Luis rightly mentioned, requires certain amount of data to go in front of, and you have been in that position of access and value-based solutions. So how do this conversation with payers generally start? It is critical because it's the icebreaker that people have to go and talk to payers, that they have to communicate certain value and go into a value-based org. arrangement, either with the payer or provider. So what is that icebreaker movement that you think is you go and say?
It's a good question. It's like any way you can, right? But I guess if there was an ideal way that so one is to try to get the meeting, which can sometimes be a challenge. And then once you can get that meeting, how do you want to enter into that conversation? And I think the best way for a value conversation.
We lost you, Luis. We lost you, Ed.
I lost Ed.
Yeah, I can hear you, Luis.
Am I back? No.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. My
Perfect.
mobile phone stole my earbuds for a second. I got a call. I should have shut it off. Sorry. So it's really about how you enter into this conversation, with the payer. And ideally, we would like to have that conversation based on what their problem is. What problem are they trying to solve? And then how can we help them resolve that problem with our relationship, the solutions that we have with the technologies that we have, and have that conversation. And it always needs to be evidence-based. So, we can't enter into those conversations unless we have strong evidence. And that's really the backbone of all of these. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere.
No, that's great. Yeah, many of the companies that are here at innovations and are in the early stage to end stage. And when we talk about payment reforms, and Luis must be really aware of this, the first question on their head is, am I going to get reimbursed? What is my reimbursement landscape looks like? And that brings me to the final question. We have been seeing changes around reimbursement happening in a rapid pace. Every year, CMS has some kind of policy changes and trying to catch up, so as to say, in terms of Luis, trying to catch up to the changing realities, even pre-pandemic. So let's forget about right now from a pandemic situation. So me being an innovative company and always scared about whether the reimbursement is there, whether I'm going to lose a reimbursement. If I lose a reimbursement, my investors are not going to invest in me. What are the steps that they should do in order to be very particular that, okay, look at some parameters before even if you start thinking about any advanced value-based care? So if there is a reimbursement analysis, reimbursement de-risking strategy in the early phase that you can think about. Luis, for
Sure.
you.
Yeah, and I think with Medicare, you can certainly go in and talk to them early. And when I was there, we did that, for example, with people who were trying to develop artificial kidneys. Because there are many things that Medicare pays for, but there are many things that Medicare does not pay for outside of a bundled payment. So for example, if you're an implanted device, it's more likely than not there will be no separate payment because the hospital is being paid a DRG or a prospective payment for the whole thing. I think one of the challenges, especially for devices in the United States, is FDA's regulatory framework. You can, for example, be 510 cleared with no human subject clinical data at all. It's a little hard to construct a value proposition from that. And even in comparative studies, non-inferiority designs are frequently accepted by FDA. And I tend to joke that, well, at the end of the trial, I'm 80% confident that I'm no more than 20% worse than my comparator. And I was speaking a few years ago to the American Gastroenterological Association in Boston, and right ahead of me was a venture capitalist. And what he said to the audience, and he and I had not talked, he said, "Do not come to me for money if you are planning a non-inferiority trial, because I cannot articulate a value proposition based on non-inferiority." So let me just stop there.
No, that's a great point, Luis. Ed, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Luis really hit on an important point. Well, which is this difference between, or what the FDA is asking for, and what the products come into market with in terms of data. For especially if you're not required to have clinical data, it really makes it challenging. a lot of our portfolio is our products that are covered by the DRG, so we don't have separate payment. And so a lot of the battles that we have are, hey, within the DRG, our products really make a lot of sense and they solve problems. But I think the issue related to getting payment for the technologies, we did see some light out there with, or a glimmer of hope with the CMS Administrator Verma making the announcement back in September for the breakthrough therapy designation, basically saying that if FDA designates something as a breakthrough therapy, we'll cover it day one. I thought that was a really important step forward, and so I think that provides opportunities for some, but also, you can't have a non-inferiority. It has to have some differentiation. It needs to be a product that adds value in a big way. So for those people that have those technologies out there, it's an opportunity, and as I said, a little bit of light for them, which is otherwise a really long haul to get separate payment.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Luis, for your valuable comments out here. I was just looking at the time and being conscious of the time. I would like to thank both of you for your feedback over here. Let me just have a look in the chat if we have some questions from our participants. Nothing as of now. So I'd really like to thank both of you to be part of this, bringing your values and your thoughts to the reimbursement systems. Luis has been always really kind of telling everything on the fact that this is not what the CMS looks at, this is what we look at, and we really appreciate that. And as usual, Ed, you have been a great resource to the entire team on thinking forward. So happy to have both of you, and this is the great point where we segue into our next discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Ed. I'm trying to have Peter.
Hey, Deepak. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can see you and I can hear you. So thank you. So in this session, we have with us Peter Stevens. He is Vice President of Business Development at Johnson & Johnson. Great to have you here, Peter. And with us, my own colleague from Alira Health, David.Sahu, joining us. Now,
how are you, Deepak?
I'm doing great. How are you, David? I
always well, thank you.
I always love the art behind you, and David has a great collection of those. I'm happy to have both of you, Peter and David, over here, because throughout this entire 4 hours prior to you joining us right now, we have started with definition of health economics and outcome research. We moved into the commercial challenges. We discussed with couple of our customers from value analysis committees and trying to capture their feedback. And we moved on into value-based care and the changing payment systems. Now, everything tied together to a lot of companies from an equity story. There is an exit strategy for all the medical devices, technologies, or diagnostic companies out there. And in this panel, what I would like to capture from both of your experiences and thoughts is, what do you see as an overall challenging trends when it comes to investing in medical devices, diagnostics, and digital health included? And where does HEOR plays the role? So that's the entire idea about this particular panel. Before we move into that, Peter, I'd like to give you the floor to introduce yourself and let people know why you are here, like why HEOR incites you in your decision-making process.
Oh, hey, yeah, thanks very much, Deepak. And congratulations to Ed and Luis and the rest of on the panels today. It's been very very useful, and especially the last session where he talked about the VC at the conference right before right before us. So I think that was we didn't pay him to say that, but it was good timing. So so a bit of my background. I've been with J&J forever, for 30 years, lots of different roles, a lot of business development in terms of mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. But then also, I did a lot of marketing, VP of marketing, and strategy. And then as I got into that role, a lot of the discussion was every year having to tell the organization like the headwinds that we're looking at for our strat plan process. It's harder to get, our reimbursement's going to go down, our coverage is going to go away, and FDA is taking longer, and all those things. And when I got into that, I started to realize that it doesn't happen in one direction. So that's when I started to work with people like MassMEDIC and our government affairs group in DC to say that, okay, we as an industry need to make sure that we have a seat at the table to understand, how the FDA is looking at things, and to be honest, how our federal officials are managing the FDA or CMS and things like that. So it really does kind of come back around to being a voice, and obviously the healthcare economics is a huge piece of this. Back in the day, the surgeon kind of got what he or she wanted, primarily he back then, but now it's much more of a much more of a nuanced decision and processes in place at the payer and as well as the hospital layer. So anyway, I just, even though I've primarily been doing buying and selling companies, I kind of continue this interest in this, because at the end of the day, I'm a better buyer or investor in companies if I can be in tune with what's going on and in the different market access issues around the world. So that's a bit of my background.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for your interest in health economics and outcome research. We have always been discussing with a lot of investors where they talk about de-risking their reimbursement and commercialization risks, but never being aware of access of having an access to a tool where they can put everything together. Thank you, Peter, to be here. David, up to you.
Thanks, Deepak. I've been in medtech myself for 30 years as well. I've always been with large cap medtech companies, and most of my roles have been in strategy and business development, leading acquisitions or any types of deals, not only M&A, but licensing, partnering, distribution, and so forth. And as well, in my last role at Covidien/Med, through the Medtronic acquisition, we also had responsibility for minority equity investing at the divisional level, partnering with the ventures team. So there was always paramount consideration for creating value within these companies when we made minority equity investments, as well as when we did M&A. In order to go to the board for any type of acquisition, one of the key criteria was an understanding and a full project executed on health economics. Whereas in the past it was a much smaller discipline, and we've seen the field completely change in the last 5 to 10 years, and it's front and center now, especially as we look at least in the U.S. the prospect of moving more toward value-based healthcare. But again, as Peter mentioned, it's not just clinician preference technologies. They have to have value and ascribed value in a formal decision-making process.
That's great to hear from you, Dave. And we have been always discussing about with our clients, if you are looking for investors and if you are looking to help convince them to de-risk certain of their variables, how do you integrate data? And how do you build health economics into it? Let me move into the first question out here. Every time as an innovative company or who is coming to an investor asking for certain investments, fail to understand the risks or the uncertainties that exist in an investor's mind. So when someone is presenting or pitching in front of you a technology at an initial investment till it goes into the commercial stage, what are the different questions that goes in your mind while evaluating those technologies?
So I think, Deepak, I think as an investor, either as an acquirer or like with David working with our JDDC venture arm and other investors, it's not always just to be commercially viable. It's exit stage, right? So if you look, for instance, in Silicon Valley Bank and their analysis the last couple of years, we always worried about the value of death in medical devices where you had an idea, then it just took a long time to actually come through to, go through all the commercial viability and show sales and take share and all those things. But if you look at it from medical devices, realistically, if you have a PMA type of product, and especially the ones that skew toward, life or death and morbidity type of things, they can actually exit pretty early. So I think the question is between initial investment and exit, because there's a lot of cases. I know I had a lot of work in the neurovascular space where, we were able to get into some pretty big bidding wars over stroke treatment, aneurysm treatment, after 30 patients in a small trial. It was far from commercially viable, and it wasn't going to be approved for years. But we as investors could know that that's where it's going to go. And so I think one of the ways investors are looking at these different opportunities is to say, okay, are we going to be able to show a real difference in a small set of patients that will allow us to project to say, hey, this is eventually going to work, and we'll take on, managing the rest of the trials and the scale up of a bigger trial, and almost like what pharma does these days, if you can get that done up front. So I would frame it as that. I think and then the other end of things are, for a classic 510K, which again, the bad news is it could take years to approval. And in some cases that the buyers are looking to wait until you can actually show differential and take share in the market. So it's not even approved, it's commercially viable. But, if Medtronic wants to know, okay, is this mousetrap really better? They may sit back and say, hey, well, let's go out and see how you do against the other mousetraps for a while, and we won't take forever, but if it really shows up, then we'll jump on board. The good news is along the way you can make some investments. The ones which are tricky, and it's the same for pharma as it is for device, are the ones that need a lot of trials, a lot of work, and there is no way to project from the early stage to late stage. In some cases, that's because of the health economics. Sometimes it's because of just the the trial size and stuff. But there is a lot of uncertainty. But one piece of it is okay, is it going to be something that is approved and will get paid for? And then the second is, okay, even if it's approved and paid for, is it going to take share?
That's a great insight, Peter, because from understanding an investor's mind, in knowing there are various kind of investors, let's say, as you rightly classified them. There are some financial investors who will never understand or will go away from a medical device considering it as a death valley. So there are various kind of investors out there. Dave, the same question. Dave, you have looked at different new technologies and innovative companies do a pitch either in front of you or you have helped them in the last 2 years. What do you think, I would say let's bring it down to the health economics perspective. What do you think many of them miss or may be missing when they are talking to a potential investor?
When we talk about health economics, let me back up just a bit. When the companies are presenting themselves, they're either looking to take, as Peter noted, either market share, or sometimes they're creating new markets, and you have to determine which end you're going there. And these are very novel new technologies, whether they're de novos or PMA. When we're looking at 510K, there's usually, of course, to get a 510K, there's a predicate. those are existing markets and you're looking at taking market share. In either realm, you still have to have a value proposition, and that could be either it's going to be fast, it's going to be easier to use, or it could be priced differently. In order to demonstrate that, we are looking at investors being very cognizant of the health economic factors, and where we saw those health economics delivered later in the creation of the company, or either they were post-approval or they were always in the earlier inception in medtech, they were done post-market or to create greater value in going after market share. Now we're seeing them incorporated much earlier. So health economic factors are being determined either during the clinical trials that they're engaging in and embarking on, or even now we're starting to see companies in their design of the technology have health economic factors considered when they're determining how they're going to develop and design the technology. And that's a little bit more rare now, but we're starting to see people cognizant of that. They have to have this at least created during your clinicals and design the clinicals around health economic factors.
Now, that's a great point. And to combine it with Peter's point, like you as an investor are not looking for a big trial, a small pilot where the thing's value can be communicated and there is a win factor. And to Peter's point of exit strategy, it all ties up together to form a story. That's great. Moving on to the next one. And Peter, again, if I come to you first, how do reimbursement and commercialization risk factors into investment decisions? So have you seen technologies which have had great value propositions, but since they do not have a reimbursement or they have some commercialization risk, get too much factored into the decisions?
Well, as David said, sometimes you have it is a fairly, really a very different technology, and ultimately it's going to make sense. But sometimes just the reimbursement isn't there. I know in our spine business, we've had situations where, technologies were obviously overall going to help the healthcare system in terms of overall cost, but it just ended up in the wrong bucket in terms of who was paying for it, or it just wasn't reimbursed, for instance, in that location of care. So there are things that you end up with a big benefit where it would be great. You could do it much easily out in an ambulatory surgery center, but it wasn't approved to get paid for an ambulatory surgery center, and that that kinds of ends up being some real misses. I think from a reimbursement perspective, as somebody said, a lot of this is if it's a DRG, it's fairly straightforward. In some ways it's you could either will be paid for, but if you're shifting who's where that value is being seen, you can end up with something that's good for healthcare. But if you follow the money, the decision maker is actually going to be worse off because for whatever reason, you're saving in it's costing more in a hospital, but saving money in rehab costs, and it's not a bundled product, so they don't really get a benefit. You end up in a bad situation. Those are a couple examples of risk factors.
Deepak, we also see that in the patient pathways. We do have to recognize that there are certain clinicians that they have their businesses, and the practice of medicine is their business, and there's patient referrals that might be precluded based on their remuneration from certain procedures. That all has to be factored in. So as Peter was alluding to, it might be beneficial to one of the constituents in the delivery of healthcare, but not detrimental to others. And that certainly has to be recognized as well. The difference between DRG and then reimbursed procedures, that has to be another consideration if there can be extension of new reimbursement schematics for a particular new procedure or new technology.
Yeah, those are really great points. What I would like to do is to tease out some of the details regarding value. From a commercial value perspective, like investors do look at different other buckets, right? But if a technology comes to you and for them it is very difficult to establish um, stakeholders' values, right? So what are the specific feedback that you will give them for you to make them comfortable or make you comfortable in establishing those values? Because many of these companies come to you at a very early stage. Maybe they have not done a trial. Maybe they have thought about that this is going to impact stakeholder in a particular way, but they do not have data at that point to convince you. So you as an investor, what goes in your mind, and shall we help them? Should I look at the real profile? Should I talk to certain physicians, or they bring certain physicians? So what does that go into the view?
Let me start here. Investors, and if we're talking, let's talk the difference in institutional versus strategic investors. The institutional investors are exactly what they're stated as. They're investing their limited partners' dollars to have a return. And I don't think it makes a difference of how they get there. It's a return on invested capital. And that comes back in an exit. And the exits are valued based on what they can drive from a revenue and from an earnings perspective. However, you're going to drive that revenue on the top line depends on the market factors. And sometimes there's barriers, and we have to understand which those barriers are. If the key consideration or one of the key considerations is reimbursement, then that has to absolutely be part of the company's formulation of activities that have to go on with that invested capital. And there best be a very strong pathway to reimbursement that's determined prior to the investment. So we have to understand as investors where that reimbursement is going to come from if it's imperative to make that revenue creation. It's that simple. If it's not a barrier, if it's part of a DRG, there have to be other value drivers that would allow that technology to be introduced and used on a very regular basis to achieve that revenue milestone, which they're pitching to the investors.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is, in terms of value, is just to understand. I mean, these investors have lots of choices. Basically, not even the investors, but the LPs, in terms of who fund them. They can do the next TikTok, or they could do a biopharma, or they could do a medical device. And so it needs to be at the end of the day, a big return on the investment to make a venture capital based company work. It's especially to get funding through most channels. You can have certain nonprofit type of societies that kind of like push along certain things, but even though there really could be a wonderful clinical impact that certain physicians are going to see and certain patients will see an impact from, unless you can show that there's going to be a big market, often you kind of have to let them down easily to say that's probably going to be better if it makes on the other side of the of this process. But if it's going to be maxing out at a $50 million total or some type of market opportunity, it's just not gonna get funded. So you can take the long, slow road to get there, but don't expect investors to go along.
Deepak, you mentioned value. Let's talk about that for just a second. You have to understand where reimbursement and value is created. And I'll give an example, and I guess it's front and center in my head because I just finished a panel on robotics, and there's not a reason that Intuitive is at an $80 billion valuation because they have reduced the cost of laparoscopic procedures. And that the health economics are there today. There's other values that they bring to the marketplace that are not based on reimbursement. These are DRG procedures. You don't get any more for doing a robotic hysterectomy that by a robotic assisted surgery than you would for a laparoscopic. So let's be clear on that. And then there are others that are paramount to it. I mean, I'll go back, Peter mentioned in their spine business, we look at things like kyphoplasty that was not going anywhere until there was reimbursement in the greater scheme of things. It was stalled out quite a bit until reimbursement was established for that procedure. And now there are many companies that have taken advantage of those reimbursements with other technologies that have been introduced. So you really have to understand what the value proposition and how health economics really play into gaining access to the market for the technology and the procedure that you're driving.
Thank you, David, for that. No, the perception of value is sometimes really different, right? And it varies from product to product. It does not always as a cost reduction is one of the values can be. So let me go to the last question. And we know it has been a long 4 hours for a lot of participants and everything is being recorded and posted. My last question for you, Peter, is there a moment from your experience where you have thought that this technology is really great, but they lack data for an investment decision to be made? Has there been
Yes, there's been lots of things where we wish we had more data. Some cases where we wish we had we did the deal and then we realized later wish we had more reimbursement sooner or whatever. But I don't know. One that comes to mind on this is there's this notion of non-invasive monitoring of things like concussions and TBI and things like that. I mean, I've seen probably 15 different companies and lots of different ways to get at it, and they're all really compelling. And when my kids are playing sports and stuff, I really wanted these to be working, and especially during the Iraq wars and stuff. But at the end of the day, you're serving to an unserved market, right? It's so basically people in waiting the ER or in an ambulance or whatever. But you're turning so many potential users into non-users into users that it needs to be really clear of even though it would be nice, how do you really establish it? And it's just one of those frustrating things where I can see the technology is kind of getting to the point where it seems the technology's made it pretty far down the path to be useful, but from an implementation perspective, the data's not there, or in some cases the process isn't there. So off the top of my head, that's one that I think of that health economics is lagging behind the technology.
Thank you, Peter. David, last comments from you.
No, to piggyback off of Peter's comment there, especially in remote patient monitoring, I was thoroughly disappointed with the adoption of remote patient monitoring. Historically, we saw over $4 billion in SVB, as Peter alluded to, has done some great data analytics on that. We've seen over $4 billion and not a lot of exits, the greater amount of utilization. Now we've seen introduction of reimbursement codes for remote patient monitoring, and the clinicians can get reimbursed for looking at their patient data. I don't say that we've fully vetted out all of the health economics, but at least from a reimbursement standpoint, we're seeing utilization, and we'll figure out what the economic benefits of this are. They were assumed to be strong, and the utilization was very low. So sometimes it's chicken or egg, I guess you'd say, Deepak. Now that we do have reimbursement, and look, sometimes it's just based out of necessity with the COVID crisis, and patients not being able to access either the facilities or even their clinicians and providers, they're being able to be monitored, and we're starting to see better use case and understanding of that. Hopefully much more data will come out of this, and we'll see some actual health economic studies done while they implement this. And that's just, I guess, in a crisis, the necessity. But there are different components of the value, and then reimbursement sometimes is in front of it or behind it.
Yeah, and Brooks is a good local Boston example of that report. They just really kind of just turned their 8 years into it, but they're not turning a corner where they're really gonna solve diabetic foot ulcers for people. So, but it's one of the few that's made it. We got a question.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, David, for being a part of this discussion. We really wanted to bring also the investor perspective into value, because one thing that we do not want to get distracted from is value when we talk about health economics only from a cost perspective. And what does it mean for the investors, right? You both brought those perspective well into play, and thank you both of you to be here. So, to all the participants who are still with us, just to let you know, at some point we were more than 100 participants joining in, tuning in, and a lot of people registered and have sent us a note to share the recording with them. The marketing team will reach out for the recorded sessions and provide you with the information that they can. I want to take this opportunity to personally thank each and every member of the panel. They are not only the panel members, they're the members of the committee that we formed together to take this initiative between Alira Health, ISPOR, and MassMEDIC forward. And as it was rightly mentioned during the keynote speaking, this is the beginning. We plan to engage more with our communities, send out questionnaires, guide them through in their we want you to focus on innovations where we will help you in achieving market access in different ways. Having said that, I would like to give floor to our great marketing and organization team, Marlena, Amy, for a few words to all
Hey,
our guests.
Deepak, I think we have a question from that. I don't know if Lynn Becker wanted to ask a question. We had her hand raised. Is that
do
purposeful? Lynn, I don't know if that was on purpose, but your mic is on if you had a question.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I really have enjoyed this, so thank you very much. And I actually come from a clinical trial research career of 25 plus years as a biostatistician and epidemiologist. And your point at the end, I think it was Peter, because I don't know who was talking at the time. But I recently launched a company after managing the traumatic brain injury portal for the US government as well. And also being a full-time caregiver for my daughter who nearly died. But the point is because patient centricity is a huge issue across the board in clinical trials. The recruitment pathways via the EHR systems, et cetera, are very poor for a lot of reasons. But you said the health economics haven't necessarily caught up to the available treatment. And I was wondering if maybe you could perhaps articulate a little bit more, because the cost to people as well as taxpayers, the financial burden for TBIs is enormous. So I was wondering if maybe you could help clarify what you meant by that.
Sure. So what I mean is, so for instance, if some of the technologies I've seen would allow you to, monitor the patient right as they're in the emergency room, or to because right now when we monitor them, they're in really bad shape, and we're basically in some cases having to do an invasive procedure to monitor them over time. And so the notion is, could we do that, earlier and decide, when to use this, in an ER and across, which set of patients would it make sense? And so from an economics perspective, it's okay if we're gonna have, I don't know what a percentage would be of potential patients who are severe enough TBI or concussion to be measured. Again, I'm not talking necessarily about things on the battlefield. That's a little bit different. That's a kind of subset of all this economics. The notion is to make this broadly available in so that you treat every suspect patient in the ER or in recognize that you'd want to measure a lot, recognizing that only a portion of them are going to be potentially under a protocol. you end up in a situation of, just that there's that incremental cost to be honest, to the healthcare system and the ER system for adding those procedures to that to all those patients, some of which are going to be, it's a concussion. It's not a very severe concussion, so they don't need treatment. Then there's others who actually have a more severe situation, but even then, it's not clear how you want to monitor and take them from there. So it just ends. What I was trying to say from the HEOR, the health economics night tying up is like the funding to allow this to be applied to all the potential concussions that come into an ER.
Yeah,
would add up to a lot across the country.
And I think I understand better your point and position, and I think it's twofold, which is one, the extreme knowledge gap, because TBI has been grossly understudied, particularly if you compare it to cancer or some single cell disease entity, and sure. the characterization of one brain injury does not mirror, even in the same person, the same kind of trauma. Which is actually the whole origin of the platform that I have built out. I would love, I don't know if y'all are going to be submitting emails to follow up, because I would really like to have a further conversation perhaps about this platform and dashboard that I built that we're getting some really great traction on because of the neurological implications across the board too. So if you are, great. I'd love to get your email and connect with you.
Or hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And Lynn, to Alira Health, you can always write us up. Our email address is public, and we can to any of the panel members as we feel suitable. So Dave and I work closely with a lot of innovative companies, helping them through. So happy to be of any help.
Subject near and dear to my heart when I ran Integra Life Sciences neuromonitoring and surgery divisions, and that it is a very underutilized or unattended to issue in TBI.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. Actually, the Michael J. Fox Foundation has reached out because we've got so many patients, and I mean, it's actually kind of impressive what's happening. They're backing up their research that they're funding into long-term longitudinal work specific to people with TBI because of the high correlations and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot that I would love. I will reach out to both of you. So I appreciate that. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, to be part of the event. And thank you, Peter, for picking out the raised hand. I almost missed a great conversation. So thank you from my bottom of my heart to all the committee members. Thank you so much. This is participants. We're going to come back on 2021 with a lot of different contents, surveys, so as to capture your thoughts and your challenges and try to channelize all these meetings in a particular direction. This is the beginning year. So hold on with us, and we will be back with more content. I want to give floor to Marlena and Amy and our marketing team, who have really put a lot of effort in bringing this through. So a couple of words from them and their motivation in putting this thing together. Amy, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Deepak. This was just a great opportunity, wonderful day, and I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone, most especially Gab for planting the seed about a year ago. Of course, Deepak and Marlena from Alira Health, my colleagues Dick and Lucinda from ISPOR, and of course Brian from MassMEDIC. All of our panelists, our speakers today, steering committee members, and then of course our attendees. Again, I think it's been said 10, 20 times today, this is the first step. This is the first of many things that this group can do and that this group will do, which is really important. And I think, you know, these problems are all of our problems. We are all working individually to address these issues, to solve these problems, meet these challenges. And, on an ISPOR level, Dick, our Chief Science Officer at the beginning, really gave a great description of who we are as an organization and what we do. And individually, we have many wonderful things to offer our HEOR community. We have conferences, traditionally in person, and hopefully again, virtually right now. We have many other educational events. We have webinars. We have a medical devices and diagnostics and a digital health special interest group. We're a place, we're an organization for people to come together that might never have an opportunity to come together. We're that safe space. We're a platform for networking, for interaction. And we really do a lot. We're very passionate about what we do in this field. But really we can only do so much by ourselves. And I really believe this take all of that to a higher level. And so this was just a great opportunity for me personally, as well as for ISPOR. And we're very happy, we're very proud to be a part of this, and really want to move forward, push the needle. I would love to have said in 4 hours we could solve all of the problems that we discussed today. We know that's not going to happen, which is why we are going to continue this conversation. So if you are unfamiliar with us at ISPOR, check us out at ispor.org. Check Alira Health, MassMEDIC out on their websites as well. Email us and let us know if you have any questions. And we would love to have you as part of the conversation in the future. So thank you again. We'll be seeing you. More to come.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. You have been a great addition and a great organizer for bringing everything together, along with Gab. Marlena, to you.
I will. Hi, everybody. Thanks for giving me a moment. Deepak, I won't go through and thank the whole list of people again, but suffice it to say there were a great number of people who came together to make this a fantastic event, particularly the speakers and also all of you who joined us for these hours. I hope, as Amy said, we may not have solved the problems, but I think we've got a really great start. And I think Alira Health, ISPOR, and MassMEDIC are all really looking forward to keeping the conversation going. And I will be in touch over the next few weeks with all of you with a little more information, a recording of this session if you'd like to go back and refresh your memory on anything. And I'll also be in touch as we keep the conversation going. So new events, new pieces of content that we collaborate on, you'll be the first to know. And you're also welcome, as Amy said, to visit any of our various websites if you'd like to know more, but feel free to email me as well. I think the invitations may have come from me, so you should have my email address, and you're more than welcome if you want to get in touch with a speaker, if you want to get in touch and chit chat with Deepak, or if there's anything else, anyone we can help you get in touch with, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to get you to the right place. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Marlena. And thank you to all our participants and committee members. It has been a pleasure and my personal honor to host such a great event. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.